The night above Winterfell lay thick as a woolen shroud, swollen with the scent of pine smoke and snowmelt. Within the godswood, the heart tree wept its slow crimson tears into the dark water of the pool. And Jon Snow tasted iron on the air. Old blood, old vows, old ghosts refusing to rest. Spring had come early that year, yet the chill clung to his skin as stubbornly as the scars left by cold iron and colder betrayals. He walked beneath moon-silvered branches, ghosts whispering in every rustle, and tried to quiet the itch that had haunted his bones for weeks now. A call distant and wordless, but powerful as any horn of winter. Ghost padded at his heels, eyes like twin embers in the half-light, hackles shivering though no enemy lurked. The direwolf felt it too, that subtle current tugging them south and east. Beyond the neck, beyond the green lands, beyond even the red keep whose stones still reeked of dragonfire and soot. Past safe harbors lay a broken peninsula, a graveyard of ruin and glass where dragons once ruled sky and sea before fire consumed them in their own cradle. Valyria. Jon paused before the heart tree, pressed a gloved hand to its rough white bark, and listened for answers. All he heard was the hush of needles in a midnight wind. Yet beneath that hush throbbed another sound, something vast and slow, like a distant furnace breathing. He felt it in his sternum more than heard it, the way a drummer's beat vibrates through wooden planks. An echo of wings, perhaps, or a heartbeat older than kingdoms. When dawn found him on the battlements, Maester Wolkan delivered a raven sealed with molten black wax. The bird bore claw marks across its breast as if it had fought free of something hungry and dark. Jon cracked the seal. 3 interlocked spirals stamped into the wax, a sigil he did not know. The parchment inside smelled faintly of brimstone. Lord Snow. The letter began, though the ink had pooled oddly as if resisting the quill. You do not know me, but I have walked through flame and shadow to reach your ears. Dragons stir in their stone wombs. One stirs for you. There followed coordinates written not in common script, but in glyphs older than old Valyria. Yet Jon understood them upon sight, as though the shapes were branded into his marrow. A cluster of islands within the smoking sea, untouched by even the bravest Korthine traders. At the bottom, a single line scrawled like a dying ember. The black dread draws breath anew. Comment. He read the letter thrice before burning it over a brazier. The flames licked blue, then green, then a color without name. Ghost's ears flattened. Jon clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached, and still that pull inside him tightened. Within a fortnight, he relinquished stewardship of Winterfell to Lady Sansa, now queen in the north by both blood and will, and set sail in a lean sloop acquired at White Harbor. Davos Seaworth, summoned by terse raven, met him on the docks with only a cloak, a dagger, and a grin as dry as salt. If you mean to chase whispers into the smoking sea, you'll be needing someone who's already danced with death, the Onionite said, wiping sleet from his beard. Jon thanked him, though words felt brittle on his tongue. He told Sansa little, only that a shadow bigger than the wall had begun to loom in his dreams. She saw the truth in his eyes, and that was enough. Arya clasped his forearm in farewell, pupils reflecting icy stars. Her wolf blood knew destiny's scent well. Bran said nothing at all, but a raven circled overhead until their sails dwindled to nothing on the horizon. Days blurred. Salt spray crusted hair and beard, and Jon found sleep only in fitful snatches haunted by scales black as void and teeth long as spears. He heard chains clatter in volcanic tunnels, felt heat like a forge upon his back, tasted ash thick as porridge. One night, he woke to find skin on his forearms stippled with dark motes, not burns, not bruises, but something else, only for them to vanish by dawn. They skirted the summer sea, slipped past Volantis under a moonless cloak, and entered waters where the charts ended and men spoke only in whispers. Here the sea steamed at sunset, and pillars of smoke writhed on the horizon like giants at prayer. Lightning flickered within ash clouds even on calm days. Their sails sagged under a perpetual veil of cinders, and the deck became a graveyard of small charred things, Birds, perhaps, or bats caught in some aerial cataclysm. The crew, loyal to Davos' coin and reputation, muttered of burned gods and cursed kings. Yet none dared turn back. On the 20th night, after a storm of boiling rain that left blisters on unprotected skin, the sea fell eerily still. No wave, no wind, no cry of gull. The water beneath them turned glassy, reflecting a sky churned bronze by a lurid dawn. Ahead, islands rose jagged and black, spines of a drowned leviathan. Fumaroles sighed green vapors along their slopes. Valyria dotted. As they threaded a narrow channel, the stench of sulfur thickened. Columns of fused stone, ruined palaces twisted by ancient heat, jutted from the sea. John saw archways carved like open jaws, and glimpsed within them murals of dragons devouring the sun, scaled bodies glimmering with an oily sheen that shifted as the ship passed. He felt eyes upon him, though nothing living stirred. They anchored in a bay whose waters sizzled around the hull. Ghost leapt down first, paws hissing against the black sand yet unharmed. John followed, boots sinking into ash soft as sifted flour. He expected to choke, but the air here tasted oddly sweet, despite the smoke, like a forge-fed lavender and myrrh. A basalt stairway climbed from the beach toward a rent in the cliffs that exhaled red light. The glyphs from the letter were etched into each riser, faintly luminescent. Davos crossed himself in the manner of the faith but kept pace. The sailors remained on board, prayers carried to the wind. The passageway opened into a cavern vast as any holdfast. Rivers of molten rock pulsed in sluices cut by hands-long dust. Above them, stalactites dripped glowing slag into pools that hissed and recongealed. At the cavern's heart lay bones, yet not bones alone. John recognized the skull instantly, though he had never laid eyes on it. Balerion, the Black Dread, whose empty sockets once dwarfed the Iron Throne. Here the skull rested upon shattered ribs, all fused with obsidian, and something darker. But this carcass breathed. Each exhale rattled chains thicker than John's torso, moored to pillars buried in magma. The skull shuddered. Scales sloughed like cooling glass, and new scales, sleeker, glossier, pushed through. Flesh reknitted, gleaming black shot through with veins of living magma. A rebirth half finished. Halted between worlds as though waiting for a midwife. From the shadows stepped a woman cloaked in tattered robes the color of deep dusk. Her eyes shone molten gold, pupils vertical like a dragon's. In her palms rested a heart of black crystal, beating softly in sync with the monster before them. "You are late," she said, voice layered with echoes, as though countless throats spoke in unison. The bindings weakened. John moved closer, ignoring heat that raised blisters on Davos' cheeks. The cavern's furnace did not burn him. Instead, it filled his lungs like crisp mountain air. Ghost prowled at his side, white coat now streaked with soot, yet unflinching. The woman extended the crystal heart. Balerion slumbers in death and dream, torn between ash and shadow. To return, he must know a rider's will. Blood strong enough to stitch old sinew to new flesh. Yours is the blood of ice and fire, John of Aegon. Take it. Then Bashanin. Jon's hands closed around the heart instinctively. It weighed far less than he expected, as if hollow, or perhaps as if weight belonged to another realm. A pulse shot up his arms, through sternum, behind eyes. Memories not his own flooded in. The doom roaring like a million furnaces, skies blackened by wings, towers sagging molten, screams of men who thought themselves gods. He staggered, but hands would not let go. "What must I do?" he asked, though voice cracked like dry clay. "Bleed," she replied. He pressed the crystal to his chest. The obsidian edges melted into flesh without pain, yet blood welled regardless, bright against soot-stained armor. It seeped into runes carved upon the heart, tracing them crimson. The cavern thrummed. Chains rattled like distant thunder. Balerion's skull lifted. One eye socket ignited with pale inner fire. swirling hot white around a pupil blacker than cave night. The other eye flared too, and a low rumble shook dust from the ceiling. John's legs buckled under a roar deeper than ocean trenches, yet he felt no fear. Instead, a tidal surge of belonging swept through him. A homecoming to a place he had never been. "Mount," the woman whispered. He advanced, each stride guided by invisible cords. The chains slackened, molten metal snapping with a shower of sparks. Massive wings unfolded, membranes still ragged where bone met regrowing tissue. Balerion lowered his neck like a battered fortress gate. John climbed scales that shifted beneath his palms, hot and slick, yet steady. When he reached the ridge between shoulders, the dragon's heartbeat sensed to his own. Davos shielded eyes against bursts of cinder, shouting something lost in the roar. Ghost howled, yet the sound harmonized with the dragon's bellow, canine and leviathan blending into a single feral note. The woman raised arms skyward. Flames coiled up her sleeves and wove into symbols that spiraled before evaporating. "Fly, Stark Targaryen. Reforge the world or unmake it. The black dread serves only power." With a thunderclap, Balerion surged forward. Rocks shattered under talons. The cavern's roof erupted outward in a geyser of lava and splintered stone as wings the size of cities beat once, twice, carving cyclones through smoke. John clung tight, hair whipping like banner cloth, and felt scales knit fully as he watched. The dragon healed mid-flight, each sinew reweaving faster than sight. They burst into the open sky. Dawn over Valyria was a wound of molten orange, and ash clouds parted like fearful hosts. Balerion roared, a sound last heard by men 4 generations dead, and the smoking sea answered with geysers of steam. Shadows cast by those wings swallowed entire islands. John sensed Davos on the beach below, staring in awe, a speck beneath the immensity of destiny. The first flight carved 90 leagues before the sun reached its zenith. They circled ruined archipelagos where spires jutted out like rotted teeth, passed over turquoise lagoons opaque with glassy crust, and skimmed the cloud tops where thunderheads birthed purple lightning. John felt heat in his veins, but also icy focus. Heritages folding together, Stark calm and Targaryen fire, locked in symbiosis. When Balerion banked northward of his own accord, John understood it was not mere instinct but memory. Dragonstone called, and beyond it the 7 kingdoms, where rumors already spread of a king who would not die and a throne that would not yield. Yet he did not rush. The woman's warning echoed. Reforge or unmake. Power demanded purpose. So, John guided Balerion toward a lonely, uncharted island, ringed with obsidian cliffs. Here he landed amid geysers hissing like a council of serpents. He dismounted, boots sinking in pumice, and watched his dragon fold wings carefully, mindful of still mending tears. Balerion's eyes regarded him, half challenge, half communion. John laid a soot-smudged hand upon the Leviathan's snout. Words were pointless. The bond shared images instead. He saw Winterfell's snow-blanketed halls, swords rusting on graves that should never have been dug, children crying for mothers lost to spear and plague, fields blackened by war. He saw dragons, once symbols of hope or terror, used as levers in politics until only ashes remained. He saw the Iron Throne, its twisted swords echoing the shape of Balerion's spine. An irony never lost on the creature who forged it. He closed his eyes and breathed. Winter air, dragon fire, sea salt, burnt cedar, all mingled into a scent older than language. "We start slow," he whispered. Though whether to himself or the dragon, he could not say. "The world already bleeds. Let us not tear it wider. Unless we must." Balerion exhaled, a plume of steam that swallowed the rising sun, and settled his massive head upon stone. John sat beside him, back against warm scale, and allowed exhaustion to claim him at last. In sleep, dreams crawled. A throne melted into slag, a young queen smiling through tears, a direwolf flying along a dragon's back, an army of dead marching, not from the north but from the sea. white figures blooming amid fogbanks south of Valyria. And above all, a voice like grinding stone, neither man nor woman. Balance is forged in flame, not birthed in snow. Choose. He woke to twilight. The island's vents glowed scarlet, painting shadows across Balerion's hide. Ghost dozed curled between forelegs larger than oaks. Nearby, Davos had made landfall in a dinghy, carrying a wineskin and a stare equal parts terror and pride. "Seven save us," the old knight muttered, easing down beside John Tato. "You always did have a taste for impossible things, lad." "Impossible has a way of becoming necessary," John said, taking the offered skin. The wine tasted of plums grown in distant, peaceful orchards. He savored it, knowing peace was now a luxury he could ill afford. Above them, the stars emerged, one by one, and John traced familiar constellations. The sword, the direwolf, the crown. But there was a new star tonight, low on the horizon, black against black, yet somehow visible. Perhaps absence made tangible. He understood it to be the Black Dread's herald, a void around which destiny would orbit. Balerion stirred, neck craning toward the northern sky. He exhaled once, and from the furnace of his throat rose sparks that did not die, but drifted upward until they joined the heavens, becoming new stars of ember and gold. In that moment, John realized the world would soon learn to dream, or scream, again beneath living dragonfire. They would need allies before enemies. They would need truth bright enough to pierce centuries of fear. And they would need patience, for even reborn legends could fracture kingdoms merely by casting shadows. John stood, feeling the island tremble with each heartbeat of the beast beside him, and looked north across leagues of black ocean. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay Dragonstow's brooding towers, and further still the heart tree whose crimson tears had called him south. Snowflakes drifted in his mind's eye, settling upon scales of obsidian, melting into hissing steam. Ice and fire again, forever entwined. He set a hand to Balerion's massive shoulder joint. Muscle flexed beneath skin like rolling thunderheads. "Tomorrow," he said, "we fly slowly. The world has forgotten wonder. We shall remind it." Balerion's answer was a rumble that shook loose a skittering of pebbles from the cliff walls. A promise or a threat. Either way, it echoed across the smoking sea like the first note of a song too vast for mortal throats. A dirge and a fanfare entwined. Night deepened. Lava rivers painted the sky from below, and Jon Snow, bastard king, exile dragon lord, closed his eyes against the glow. Sleep snagged him again, gentle as a mother's hand, and dreams this time showed something different. Fields of green unscarred by war, children laughing beneath wings that darkened the sun only in play, and a throne room emptied of swords, filled instead with living trees whose leaves whispered of spring forever. The dream was fragile, precarious as an eggshell, but it was alive, and so was he, and so was the Black Dread. 3 fragile hopes against a world of rusted blades and haunted crowns. For now, it was enough. In the deep, molten hush, Jon Snow slept, and Balerion kept watch, and the ruins of Valyria listened as myths long buried began once more to breathe. A.K. Dust the color of charcoal drifted across the island at dawn, curling in languid ribbons around jagged obsidian rocks and settling into the crevices of Jon's boiled leather boots. He rose from restless sleep, with the dim impression that the ground itself had been whispering throughout the night, muttering in a language of cracking stone and bubbling magma. Balerion's massive bulk still radiated heat behind him, the dragon's steady breaths pulsing like distant surf upon a shore of cinders. Ghost lay sprawled nearby, white coat gray with ash, nose twitching at scents too subtle for mortal senses. Jon stretched, muscles protesting after days of sailing, nights of half-sleep, and the violent revelation of taking the Black Dread as mount. His hand drifted unconsciously to the place on his chest, where the crystal heart had melted into flesh. The wound was gone without scar, yet he felt something new lodged beneath skin and bone. An ember perhaps, or a key fitted to a lock deep inside his soul. Each heartbeat stirred that ember, and with it came echoes. Glimpses of 1,000 skies Balerion had once flown, screams of cities he had raised to nothing but molten memory. And woven through all of it, a heady exultation, the intoxicating certainty that nothing under the sun could match a dragon and his rider at full thunder. He shook off the visions and began picking his way toward a narrow tongue of black sand where Davos squatted over a sputtering cookfire. The Onion Knight greeted him with a curt nod and wordlessly extended a strip of dried fish. Jon tore a bite, flavorless but fortifying. The men said little, the morning spoke enough. Geysers hissed in rhythmic intervals up the slope, spouting luminous vapors that hung like ghostly banners before dissolving in the wind. Sulfur and salt warred in the nostrils. In the distance, columns of petrified trees, roots fused into glossy glass, jutted from pumice fields like a silent army turned to stone mid-charge. Crews rattled, Davos said at last, voice pitched low so as not to travel. Half of them swear they saw demons dancing in the steam last night. Other half want to gut the ship's ballast and sail before the sea decides to boil again. They'll have their leave soon, Jon replied. He glanced at the looming silhouette of Balerion, wings furled, tail coiled around a newly formed crater. We sail north with the next tide. Those who stay may keep the ship and coin enough to silence any tongues in Old Town or Volantis. Nam? Davos eyed him, admiration and apprehension tussling behind salt-slick lashes. And you? Planning to swoop over King's Landing tomorrow and melt the Red Keep for a gift? No. Jon knelt to add half-burned driftwood to the fire, savoring the sting of heat against chilled fingertips. The realm suffered enough firestorms. We gather knowledge first, truths buried by years of lies and crowned skulls. He paused, meeting the older man's gaze. Will you stay? The knight's grin returned, rough as a barnacle-lined hull. Figures I've come too far to turn back. Someone's got to remind you when you're acting a fool. Might as well be me. Jon clasped Davos' forearm in thanks. Above them Balerion stirred, volcanic eyes opening to slits as though he too approved. The ground vibrated faintly in response. The bond between dragon and rider was not a leash but a conversation, and every unspoken assent felt like a throne-room pledge sworn in steel. They spent the morning preparing. From the sloop's hold Davos unearthed crates of hardtack, skins of sour wine, lengths of rope, tar-sealed jars of lamp oil, and a single iron-bound chest that had traveled unclaimed since White Harbor. Jon pried it open with a dagger. Within lay a scorched banner bearing the stark direwolf quartered with a three-headed dragon of crimson on sable. Sigils twined by some merchant in Bravos, who had convinced himself prophecy alone could fetch a profit. Jon stared at the cloth, fingertips tracing embroidery fine as spider silk. Unease prickled. A single banner could raise hope or suspicion depending on who first spied it whipping in a fresh wind. He refolded the thing and closed the chest. Not yet, he muttered. By midday the crew, some 30 souls, assembled on the beach for a terse farewell. Many crossed themselves in Neanderthal fashion. A few spat to ward off sorcery. One woman, a summer islander with eyes like burnished copper, bowed to Jon and whispered, "The gods grant second lives to those who dare reclaim lost fires." She pressed a feather carved from obsidian into his palm before boarding the longboat. It glinted with labyrinthine striations, as though it contained whole maps to hidden skies. Jon and Davos watched until the sails vanished behind a curtain of sulphurous fog. Then island silence returned, heavy as the lid on a sarcophagus. Balerion's breath fanned hot across their backs, beckoning. They mounted by mid-afternoon. The dragon crouched low, allowing Jon to scramble to the ridge of fused scales, where he had ridden the day prior. Davos climbed behind, hesitant, knuckles white, and secured a length of rope around his waist, though the practicality of such a thing against a sudden plummet to rocky surf seemed laughable. Ghost bounded up last, settling between Jon's legs like a sentinel made of moonlight and snowdrift. There was room. Balerion's back spanned half a tilt-yard. Jon spoke a single thought, wordless, yet the dragon shifted in readiness. With a crack like splitting mountains, the black dread launched skyward. The island dropped away in heart-stopping haste, vents dwindling to candle flame glows. Obsidian spines shrinking to child's toys, the sea flattening into a pewter mirror. Ash-laden clouds swallowed them, temperatures soaring before plummeting as they burst through anvil tops into clear air so thin it rang in the ears. Sunlight flashed off Balerion's resurgent scales, now fully mended, each plate showing veins of molten copper that faded to deepest midnight along the edges. The great wings beat once, twice, then settled into a dragon glide so smooth it seemed the world moved beneath them, rather than they above it. John breathed deep. At this height, each inhalation felt light as a whispered oath, yet charged by a raw exhilaration no battlefield had ever offered. He risked a glance behind. Davos clung, jaw slack, eyes streaming from rushing wind. The man managed a lopsided grin, then squinted northward where horizon and sky met in an indistinct band of hazy blue. They banked gradually toward Dragonstone. John guided with pressure of thighs and subtle tilts of body, movements learned in dream practice as much as instinct. Balerion responded like a hawk to glove, wingtips adjusting fractionally to follow lines only rider perceived. Hours passed thus, sea and cloud in endless cadence, until the sun dropped to citrine behind them, and a chill crept from the north. Dragonstone emerged at dusk, jagged silhouette cut from volcanic nightmares. Towers shaped like twisting spines, courtyards paved in scales of fused dragon glass, battlements that resembled serrated teeth. No pennants flew, not even the crowned stag of Baratheon now that Stannis and his daughter were gone, nor the golden lions once flown by Lannister garrisons. Only vacant ramparts met the failing light, lonely as abandoned nests. War and plague had emptied many castles over the years. Rumors claimed sell sales and smugglers used Dragonstone's harbor, but fires seldom burned in her hearths. John willed Balerion to circle wide. Fishing skiffs bobbed near the islet's sheltered side. Men aboard them stared upward, mouths forming prayers and curses alike. When the dragon's shadow masked the last breath of sunlight, small shapes fled across parapets. The fortress might be empty, but fear remained entrenched in the stones. They landed in the courtyard once called the Dragonmont, an oval surrounded by colossal basalt statues of serpents and riders. Balerion's talons cracked shattered flagstones further. Centuries of moss and guano puffed in choking clouds. John swung down, knees bending to absorb the shock, and scanned for threats. None came. Davos staggered after him, retching from vertigo but alive. Ghost leapt nimbly to the ground and sniffed at gouges left by the dragon's claws, ears swiveling to every echo. The air here felt thinner than at sea level, despite the island's modest height. John sensed sorcery embedded in the bedrock, old Valyria's forging power, slumbering but restless. It welcomed Balerion like a prodigal son. Lights flickered along ruined corridors, torches blooming where no hands kindled them. John's palm tingled. The invisible ember beneath his breastbone pulsed brighter, guiding him forward. They crossed the yard to a pair of iron-bound doors half off their hinges. Inside lay the Hall of Dragonlords, a nave of soaring arches and obsidian benches carved with intertwined beasts. Dust veiled everything, but along the central aisle, a pattern of recent footprints, booted, perhaps half a dozen different pairs, disturbed the grime. Someone had been here since the fall of King's Landing, perhaps within the past fortnight. At the dais, benches flanked a long stone table shaped like a winged dragon in flight, a relic of Aegon's conquest where battle plans were etched across the vertebrae. 9 candles burned upon it, wicks dripping blood-red wax though no draught stirred. Their flames leapt higher at John's approach, bending toward him. An old man stepped from the shadows behind the throne. His robe, once maester's gray, hung in tatters. Chain links glimmered dull copper about his neck, most snapped away. Skin like parchment clung to his cheeks, and one eye was milky with cataract, the other a piercing green. He bowed stiffly. "Lord Snow, or shall I say Stark, or Targaryen, names seldom matter to dragons." His voice rasped like parchment rubbed on stone. "I felt the castle waken when you entered the sky. Valyria's blood sings. Even these old walls remember. John rested a hand on Longclaw's pommel, but did not unsheath. "Who are you? And what business do you have in a dead keep?" "I am called Maester Vymond," the man replied. "Once I served at King's Landing, but that city is cinders and broken bells now. I serve wisdom, nothing more. And I came because the winds carried word of fire reborn, fire great enough to melt the lies layered on this kingdom like ice after storm." He gestured at the table. "Others come as well. We gather quietly, as mice gather before the bull returns to the barn." Membarao. Footsteps echoed behind pillars. Figures emerged, a tall woman wearing weather-beaten brigandine over sand-colored robes, likely from Dorne by the tilt of her chin and curve of her scimitar. A burly man in mail too fine for an ordinary hedge knight, purple bruise marking his jaw, eyes sharp. A septa whose vestments lay charred along the hem, bearing a torch as though it were a scepter, and two lithe youths, twins clearly, hair silver gold but cut short and murdy. None bore a royal banner, yet each radiated purpose. Davos' hands hovered near his dagger. John lifted a calming palm. "You expected me. We hoped." The Dornish woman spoke now, voice like sun-baked stone. Whispers from the narrow sea tell of a black wind stirring in Valyria, and of a rider cloaked in snow. Black wind, or black dread? It matters little. The realm rots. Winterfell's ravens speak of cold lords fracturing. The Stormlands huddle behind broken walls. The Reach starves from failed harvests. The Iron Throne sits empty, yet every petty lord lays a claim, and none can keep the small folk safe. We need a symbol. She gestured upward, as though Balerion's shadow still covered them. "You. Him." The burly knight scoffed. "A dragon is symbol enough, but symbols burn just as hot as wildfire. Put one tyrant on his back and we've traded chains for cremation. Dragons are not tyrants." The Septa's eyes shone with unseemly fervor for a sister of the faith. "They are purifiers. Where sin clings, flame cleanses. The Seven themselves sent this sign." John stepped forward, voice low but flint hard. "Flame kills small folk as swiftly as it kills lords. I will not be weapon for zealotry, nor for ambition. If you sought me for conquest, turn back." Silence. Even the candles seemed to pause their flicker. Then Maester Vymond shuffled forward, lifting a hand cloth thin. "We sought a rider not of conquest but of balance. Dragons once carved order from chaos. Brutal. Aye. Yet for a time the kingdoms prospered under one crown. But that crown corroded with cruelty, and dragons died until none remained to fracture or to mend." His good eye glimmered. "Now one lives again. It may break the realm or bind it anew. Which path depends on you." Then a Timpi. John studied their faces. Hope mingled with fear, ambition twined with desperation. The young twins clutched each other's wrists, silent but wide-eyed, perhaps last descendants of some extinct river lord's line. The knight's shoulders bore scars old and fresh. He knew wars intimately and dreaded their return. The Septa's faith smoldered darkly. She would watch the world blaze if she believed it holy. The Dornish woman's gaze never left Gion's. Her challenge was frank. Prove yourself worthy or be dismissed. And Vymond, tired, eager, half-blind, yet still searching for meaning in a life stretched longer than most men's hope. He inhaled, feeling the ember pulse, and spoke. "I am not king, though blood says otherwise. I am not conqueror, though dragonfire may suggest it. I am watcher on walls unseen. Those between living and dead, between justice and vengeance, between order and ruin. If you gather here for counsel, then speak of what plagues our realm, and perhaps together we forge a path neither paved with corpses nor shackled by fear." He touched the pommel of Longclaw, a wolf's head wrought in pale stone. "But know this, Direwolf and Dragon both answer my call. Betray what good we attempt, and neither fire nor ice will spare you." Davos breathed out, relief mingling with pride. The assembly exchanged glances. Slowly, they nodded. The Dornish woman stepped closer, unsheathing her curved blade and planting it tip first into the floor. "A pledge. I am Nymeria's Sand, daughter of no great lord, sworn to restore what the Red Viper died protecting. Dignity for Dorne and justice for all free folk. My blade is yours while your cause is righteous. The burly knight followed, kneeling despite a grunt of pain from stiff joints. Sir Adam Nelmere, once of the King's Guard, though the Order's honor lies wounded, if you strive to mend rather than dominate, my sword will shield you. The Septa lifted her torch higher. Septa Lyanne, called by visions to serve not the High Septon's politics, but the will of the Seven. I see flames around you, Lord, yet also new wheat sprouting from ash. I will counsel mercy when wrath tempts. No. The twins spoke in unison, voices soft as dusk bells. We are Aelin and heiress of House Celtigar, last as far as we know. Dragonstone was once our liege. We return out of hope that its dragons protect their own again. We offer ships and silver hidden from earlier pillagers. Maester Vaemond bowed low. Chains clinking. I shall lend knowledge, even if my bones fail. Lore of dragon lore, Valyrian secrets, ancient maps. Most were burned by zealots, but not all. Torch my library only when corpse fires burn low. Jon accepted their oaths with a silent nod. His mind raced. Allies came too easily. Suspicion whispered of traps, but the realm's despair might indeed have driven these souls to hazard everything on one last mythic gamble. He must vet each pledge, test loyalty, temper fervor. Yet inside his chest, the ember warmed. Perhaps, just perhaps, destiny's heavy net ensnared not just kings and queens, but orphans, exiles, and wildcards in equal measure. Night deepened. They cleared long-abandoned quarters, replacing moldy straw with bedrolls, setting braziers alight. Ghost prowled corridors, scenting rat and intruder alike. Balerion coiled in the courtyard, eyes like banked furnaces watching every tower. The keep, somnolent for decades, awoke. Hinges groaned open of their own accord. Fireplaces drew with invisible bellows. Distant forges echoed as though ghostly smiths resumed work. Valyria's imprint reasserted itself, galvanized by the dragon's presence. Jon found himself alone on a high balcony near midnight, sipping watered wine as moonsilver glimmered on the sea. Far below, phosphorescent plankton traced swirls in Balerion's reflection. He felt a presence before a word was spoken. Bran stood beside him, though Jon had not heard footsteps. His brother's eyes, one warm brown, the other milky where white raven's wisdom nestled, regarded him with calm that quivered at the edges, like ice over a swift river. You rode the Black Dread, Bran observed, voice bearing neither awe nor censure, merely fact stating itself. That changes many threads. Jon swallowed shock and set down the goblet. You knew I left Winterfell. I saw paths, Bran replied. Some ended in ash. Some in ice. Some twisted into knots no man could untie. This path, he touched a finger to the stone railing, tracing invisible constellations. It is narrow but still walks toward spring. Jon leaned elbows on cold stone. Tell me what you see now. Bran's gaze drifted beyond present sphere, pupils dilating. I see ships with black sails moving up the Mander, burning harvest stores. I see a lion banner drenched in wildfire green on the steps of Baelor's Sept. I see a white wolf standing between two fires, one red, one blue, unable to move without feeding one flame. He exhaled, lashes fluttering. But most of all, I see you atop Balerion above the trident. Rain lashing, lightning splitting the sky, and beneath you armies that refuse to break line though their boots sink in blood. He blinked. Mortal once more. You will need more than banners and oaths soon. I never wanted more war. Jon's voice shook. The dead fell. The long night ended. But men keep making new nights to fear. Then give them dawn, Bran said simply. A dragon's fire can burn, but it can also light. Jon clasped his brother's arm. Will you stay? Bran shook his head. The roots of the world are restless. If Balerion's shadow stirs them, the weirwoods must listen. I must be their ear. He stepped back, and suddenly a raven landed on the railing. Black feathers gleaming. Bran's form faded into night like frost on a sunlit windowpane. The raven regarded Jon, croaked once, then took wing, disappearing into the stars. Jon remained, heart aching yet strangely steadfast. Bran's words echoed, "Give them dawn." Dawn required more than light. It required warmth, mercy, promise of growth after the thaw. Could a dragon known as the Black Dread, architect of cities' endings, serve such purpose? Could he? Below, Balerion unfurled one wing lazily, catching moonlight on indigo membrane. Through their bond, Jon felt not hunger for carnage, but contentment verging on curiosity, as though the ancient beast had tasted long-withheld freedom, and now pondered what new skies offered beyond conquest. A rider's will shape a dragon's path, but dragons in turn shaped riders. He must remain vigilant, to guide power rather than be guided by it. Wind shifted. The faintest tang of smoke reached his nose, not from hearth or forge, but from distant farmland. No storm threatened. This was unnatural. Somewhere in the reach, fields burned. Trouble already stirred. He returned inside, convened his newfound council in the chart room beneath flickering sconces. They spread ink-blotted maps, pinned candle stubs to mark rumors. Bandit hosts in the Kingswood, calling themselves the True Stags. A sellsword legion seizing Bitterbridge. Raiders from the Iron Isles harrying gullible peasants along the Sunset Sea. Faith militant cells lynching mummers who dared perform body farce. The realm's fracture lines spidered outwards. Jon issued tasks. Nymeria to ride south with a handful of volunteers and contact Dorne's restless paramours, offer alliance for mutual protection and fair trade. Sir Adam to gather any disillusioned former Kingsguard or City Watch veterans. Discipline would be crucial if lawless lords marched. Septa Lyanne to rally moderate brothers and sisters of the faith, temper zeal with measured hope. The Celtigar twins to sail their hidden fleets along Blackwater Bay, interdict slavers who exploited chaos, and quietly spread rumor that Dragonstone once more bore dragonfire, in protective wingspan, not pillaging talons. Vimond to delve archives for mention of blue fire. The cold sorcery Bran's vision had hinted might oppose them. Within a sennight, they would reconvene, measure progress, plot next moves. If war erupted faster than reforms, they must be ready. If diplomacy bloomed, they must nurture carefully. Every decision would ripple. Dragon wings beat storms across seas. After council, Jon retired to a narrow chamber, high in the stone drum. Dawn found him sleepless, quill frozen, above parchment. He intended to write Sansa, explain alliances, dangers, hopes, but words tangled. How does one describe standing atop reincarnated doom? At last he wrote, "Sister, the ghosts of dragons breathe again. I will wield this fire as shield more than sword. Keep the north whole. Send what news you can via trusted ravens. Send Arya if she wills. Her eyes see truths mine miss. Tell the little ones stories of summer. Tell them spring is coming, not by miracle, but by we of ice and fire together forging it." He sealed the parchment with wax pressed by the direwolf signet Sam had carved for him long ago. As he handed it to a courier, thunder boomed though skies were clear. He rushed to the balcony. Balerion stood restless, wings half unfurled, smoke curling from nostrils. Across the water, sails pricked the horizon. 3, 4, then 7. Galleys, swift and shallow drafted, bearing banners he could not yet discern. Davos appeared beside him with a spyglass, cursed softly. Those colors, black on red, but not Targaryen, could be cell sails under Volantene coin. Smugglers, maybe slavers. Jon's jaw tightened. Or spies who saw a dragon's silhouette last eve, and mean to claim reward for information. Or test their new cannons on old myths. He felt Balerion's impatience thrumming. We greet them. Moments later he straddled the dragon again, ghost behind him as ever. Davos refusing to remain this time. The Onion Knight clambered up, grumbling about old knees and younger foolishness. They rose on a gust of red-lined wind and shot across the bay. The galley slowed, Some attempted to turn, but Balerion's descent plowed a trough in the water that sent warships pitching. Jon hailed them in the common tongue. "Name your flags." Silence. Then arrows loosed, black-fletched, whistling. They rattled harmlessly off scaled hide. Jon felt Balerion's temper spike, a furnace door flung wide. He reined it with effort, speaking Valyrian syllables. Soothing, commanding. The dragon banked left instead of spewing flame, claws raking water and a warning that threw up a curtain of steam. A voice answered from flagship deck, high Valyrian accented by the free cities. "We seek only proof. Our prince pays well for knowledge of living dragons. Bring her to Lys, and riches are yours." "Hair?" Davos muttered. Jon glared. "Return whence you came," he called. "Tell your prince the skies are guarded. Dragons serve no purse." He guided Balerion closer. Shadow engulfing the flagship. Next arrow loosed will find only char. Perhaps the slaver captain sensed truth in that. His ship turned slowly, followed by the others, hulls groaning. Balerion harried them until their sails shrank to specks. Back on Dragonstone, Jon paced ramparts, anger smoldering. These were test incursions. Knowledge of Balerion would spread faster than wildfire wind. Soon would come envoys bearing crowns, assassins bearing poisons, maesters bearing chains of counsel, perhaps red priests bearing prophecies. Every faction would shape the legend to its ends. He must shape it first. That evening he gathered his council in the courtyard beneath Balerion's lowered head. Torches painted everyone in molten hue. Jon spoke clearly. "Our first act is mercy. Volantis deals in chains. Lys deals in flesh. We end that trade in these waters, not with fire, yet but with warning. Those galleys will return with tales of a dragon who spares those who relent. Let the next slaver choose fear or change." He met their eyes one by one. "But if fear fails, flame follows. I will not allow innocence to suffer as coin again." "Dan?" The group nodded, sober. Even Septa Lyanne accepted the tempered approach, perhaps seeing divine judgment in Mercy's patience. Nymeria smirked. Fire withheld as arrow knocked. Sometimes a drawn bow speaks louder than any bard. Sir Adam placed gauntlet over heart. "The realm will hear. Word of smoke draws moths and bats." He glanced toward the north, where rumors of Ironborn raids persisted. "We must be ready. And we will be." Jon turned, laying a hand against Balerion's jaw. Warm stone rumbling beneath. Valyria forged the black dread for conquest. We will reforge him for guardianship. Let that be our creed. Stars burned overhead, constellations shifting as though to carve out new shapes. Perhaps a direwolf riding a dragon. Perhaps a scale and sword entwined. Jon felt the ember blaze bright, unifying pulse of ice and fire. Beside him, allies uncertain but resolute joined in silent accord. The night stretched long with planning, mapping, strategizing. Yet within that long dark, somewhere deep in the reach, farmers kindled hope when they saw an unfamiliar silhouette patrolling high above, driving off marauders who torched granaries. In the stepstones, corsairs waited nervously, scanning skies for ebony wings. In Old Town, maesters argued late into candle hours, dusting off tomes labeled Dracaris and Jotnar ipso Aegon. And in the Red Keep's ruin, vagrant children whispered of a black god returning to punish wicked kings, while broken lords drank regrets and wondered whether to bend knee to legend or sharpen pikes against doom. 5 days later, ravens arrived at Dragonstone. 3 from Winterfell. 2 from Gulltown, 1 sealed with the crowned rose of Highgarden. Each carried tidings of unrest and a plea. Send word if protection can be bought not with gold, but with oath. The realm teetered. The Dawnbrand had spoken of lay fragile beyond horizon. Jon donned simple leather. Sword strapped, banner still folded away. He strode to the courtyard where Balerion waited, wings itching for broader skies. Davos tightened saddle lashings. Nymeria saluted with a flourish of scimitar. Adam checked harness loops for ghost. Septa Lyanne whispered something that smelled of myrrh and hope. Vaimon pressed into John's hand a small scroll inked with directions to wells of weirwood sap, rumored to heighten Dragon Rider communion. The twins loaded chests of coin and grain seed onto lesser drays. John mounted. Firelight danced across his cuirass, forging illusions of burning snowflakes that winked out as he moved. He breathed deep, set eyes north toward the King's Road invisible beyond the clouds. His voice then carried across walls and waves alike. Today we ride not to conquer, but to show the realm it need not fear its own salvation. We ride to prove that ancient nightmares can become living guardians. We ride for those who till and who fish, and who kneel yet receive no justice. He touched Longclaw's hilt. We ride for dawn. Balerion reared. The courtyard quaked. Ash and spark flurried upward. With titanic thrust, the dragon vaulted into the sky. Wings thunderclaps against the dawn's first blush. Joan's council watched, hearts forging new legends from the sight. High above rolling clouds, John guided Balerion into the rising sun. The light refracted through translucent membranes, igniting the dragon's wings into stained glass vistas of crimson, amber, violet. Below, the narrow sea glittered like a mirror of shattered obsidian. Ahead lay riverlands choked by fear and fields longing for spring. John pressed a gloved hand to his breast, feeling that inner ember burn steady. Balerion banked in recognition, sharing memory and resolve without words. Rider and dragon flew east of the King's Road, tracing arcs over sleepy villages, casting shadows that froze men mid-plow, yet left them unscorched. Crowds gathered. Children pointed. Old veterans dropped to knees, tears mixing with soot. And where slavers' sails dotted inlets, Balerion roared. No flame, only thunder, and ships fled with sails aflutter like desperate gulls. At sunset they alighted on a riverside meadow near Maidenpool, hoof-trampled by sellswards. John strode among the tents, Balerion looming behind like night given form. Raiders fled, peasants peered. John found their leader, a brutish knight wearing stolen sigils, cowering inside a plundered carriage. He offered the man a choice: kneel, return spoils and swear to protect this town for 1 year unpaid, or feed the dragon a supper of coward's flesh. The knight sobbed as he kneeled. Word traveled faster than ravens. By the time John reached Harrenhal's Black Ruins 2 days later, small folk hailed him. The White Flame. Farmers offered story cakes shaped like dragons, and petty lords dispatched envoys with sealed parchments proclaiming fealty. John accepted none yet. Oaths given from fear rot quickly. Instead, he listened to grievances, left seed grain, taught a village headman how to read the crown's old harvest laws. He set knights Adam and Nymeria to patrol, forbidding them to draw blades except in defense of innocent life. Around cook fires at night, John told stories of the long night's ending. Not of his own resurrection, but of the thousands whose courage lit the snows. Children clutched each other when he spoke of whites. They cheered when he described giant 1-1 hurling boulders at undead shadows. And when he finished, he would point to Balerion curled nearby and say, "Monsters may become myths. Myths may become guardians. Remember, tomorrow you choose what legends to follow." Soon even isolated holdfasts in the Crownlands heard that a dragon and his direwolf companion dispensed justice. Swift, yet merciful. Some lords reached for bribes, others sharpened treachery. House Hightower sent a raven offering library access. House Greyjoy sent threats. In King's Landing's rubble, a shadow council convened, debating whether to send cell sails, armed with scorpions, or to welcome the new protector and crown him before another could. Joan's council reconvened at Maidenpool, under makeshift tents. Reports flooded in. Nymeria's Dornish network promised grain caravans up the Roserad. Adam had rallied 50 seasoned retainers wearing blank surcoats, veterans choosing symbol later. Septa Lyanne persuaded the poor fellows in Cobbler's Square to rebuild orphan barracks instead of preaching fire. The Celtigar twins secured port rights in Driftmark for refugees. Yet Maester Vaimon brought darker tidings. Tales of blue flames glimpsed beyond the wall. Ghost frost storms unnatural even in northern spring. Whispers of dead, not yet fully gone. And a traveling bard spoke of a fleet from Korth bearing cages of wyverns, smaller than dragons but still lethal. They hoped to sell them to any claimant flush with old gold. Balance teetered. John listened, weighed. "We answer threat with unity," he said at last. "Send riders to Winterfell, to Highgarden, to Sunspear. Invite them to a conclave here in Maidenpool within 3 fortnights. They will come curious if not trusting. We show them dragon but promise shield. If they refuse counsel, we proceed still, but we will not say we did not offer hand before sword." As ravens launched, Bran's earlier vision returned. A wolf between 2 fires. He understood now the fires. One red, one blue, symbolized twin powers. The fullness of dragonfire and the uncanny frost of ancient adversaries. He stood between them, needing to safeguard mortal realms from both. The ember in his chest seemed to glow whitely for a moment, a convergence of extremes. That evening he visited Balerion alone. The dragon lay stretched across meadow and hillside, tail coiled through oak grove. John sat against a shoulder where warmth radiated through leathers like midday sun on snow. "Have you ever flown beyond the edge of maps?" he asked softly. The words were needless. "We may yet, if blue fires rise again." Balerion's eye half opened, pupil narrowing to a slit. Acceptance pulsed through the bond. Steel meeting forge. He closed his eyes. Sleep claimed him swiftly, dreams quickening into visions. Icy meteors streaking southern skies. A skull of sapphire where Harrenhal once stood. Children laughing as they ride small dragons of bronze through orchard blossom. Bran seated beneath a weirwood whose roots coil around glass candles, burning glass candles burning blue. And a throne room grown wild with vines. Petals of... When he woke before dawn, dew clung to his cloak. The ember burned steady. He rose, feeling gravitas settle yet again. The subtle weight of countless lives leaning on decisions not yet made. He whispered to the horizon. "Spring is fragile, but we will guard its first flowers with tooth and flame, fang and claw, sword and truth, until gardens bloom where graves once lay." Balerion's answering rumble rippled across still waters, scattering waterfowl skyward like flurries of feathered snow. Morning unfurled pink and gold across the clouds. A new banner for a new age. And so the white flame rode on, not as conqueror but as guardian, carving slow arcs of hope across a land that had forgotten what dawn felt like. Yet beneath the budding promise, frost shadows gathered and foreign sails crept closer. And in Crypt's long-forgotten blue eyes fluttered open in depths untouched by dragonfire. The dance of balance had only just begun, and every step henceforth would test hearts and histories alike. Junda. A mist of silver lay over the rolling meadows east of Maidenpool. More dew than fog, yet thick enough that even the broad black silhouette of Balerion blurred at its edges. It was the hour birds debate whether to sing or sleep again, and the world seemed caught between breaths. Jon Snow stood ankle-deep in wet grass, arms folded, watching vapors swirl between his boots. Nearby, Davos Seaworth snored beneath a patched cloak, his head pillowed on a saddlebag. Farther off, Nymeria Sand greeted the dawn with sword kata slow and precise, each sweep of her curved blade cutting skeins in the mist that closed immediately behind her. Ghost wandered, white as the vapor itself, appearing and vanishing like a spirit testing the bounds between worlds. Jon's thoughts lingered on Bran's vision of blue fires and of an army that would not break. The Night King was gone. He himself had watched Arya's blade find the heart of winter. But if some other frost-bound power stirred, it might strike not from frozen distance, but from treachery within. He touched the spot beneath his leathers where the molten heart had fused with his own. The ember pulsed, neither hot nor cold, only fundamentally alive. Sir Adam approached, armored but unhelmed, short hair damp. "Riders from the north arrived in camp last night," he said. "Wanted you woken at once, but I saw no cause to rouse a man who slept scarcely 2 hours." He offered a humorless smile. "They wear Karstark colors, but their captain bears a letter sealed by Lady Sansa." Jon inhaled, tasting heather on the wet air. "Have them shown to the council marquee after breakfast." He hesitated. "And a dam, keep our numbers spread in pickets. I mistrust surprises fashioned overnight." The knight bowed and strode off. Jon turned back to the giant dozing form of Balerion. So long as his dragon lay at peace, the camp would rest easier. But fear still lurked. He had seen men tremble merely at the scrape of talon on stone. A living myth forced mortals to confront the size of the sky. The council met beneath canvas-colored sun-warm amber by torches within. Sansa's letter, pressed into Jon's hands by the Karstark captain, was concise in her unmistakable script. "Brother, rumors gallop ahead of ravens. Lords gather asking if Stark will bend knee to dragon once more. The north is wary but not hostile. I send Roderick Karstark and 20 riders bearing grain and goodwill. Arya hunts south and may find you soon. Bran speaks in riddles we all pretend to understand. The wall reports blue-lit storms near Eastwatch. Stay wary. In snow and silence, Esk." Jon read twice before passing it around. Nymeria traced the folded crease thoughtfully. "Blue-lit storms." She echoed. "Did your tales of winter's demons not end when the spear of Valyrian steel found its mark?" Jon shook his head. "The wind beyond the wall obeys deeper laws. Break one master and another may rise, even if weaker. A spark in powder snow can smolder unseen till whole forests flash." He looked to Vaymond. "What lore speaks of embers after the long night?" The old maester shuffled parchments. "Fragments only. One scrap from the Jade Compendium says, 'When ice is shattered, shards remember cold.' Another, written in old tongue, warns that certain barrow mounds drink moonlight and stir. Most scholars dismiss them as metaphor." "Nem? Metaphor burns no farms," Sir Adam muttered. Jon outlined a plan. Nymeria would ride north with half her scouts to White Harbor, then sail up the Bay of Seals toward Eastwatch, gauging truth behind spectral storms. Sir Adam would remain to fortify Maidenpool, training levies who trickled daily from nearby hamlets. Septa Lyanne would escort Karstark riders back toward Winterfell, sowing tales of Dragonshield not Dragonscourge, and offer grain to snow-struck villages along the way. The Celtigar twins, already repairing an abandoned tower on Driftmark, would dispatch swift cogs south to watch for Corthine wyvern ships rumored on the summer sea. Maester Vaymond, too frail for long journeys, would stay at Dragonstone to ransack scrolls hidden beneath collapsed libraries. And Jon would fly west with Balerion and a small honor guard, visiting Highgarden's war-scarred fields and Storm's End's salt-blasted ramparts. Allies owed nothing until asked face to face. A living dragon, he reasoned, should speak not from distant echo but from eye level, where fear might give way to awe. Awe perhaps to trust. Preparations consumed 2 days. On the morn of departure, Arya arrived with the dawn, riding a shaggy Geron streaked gray and white. She greeted Jon with a grin, hugging him so fiercely his ribs protested. Her lean frame had filled with sinew yet remained quicksilver. "Nice lizard," she remarked, whistling low at Balerion, who sniffed her curiously. "You'll never sneak through castle doors on him." She brought news. The Necklands teemed with sellswords driven from the stepstones by hard winter currents. They raided small folk and blamed the Sky Wolves. Rumors now swirling that Jon commanded a pack of dragon-riding northerners. Arya tracked one band to a ruined sept outside Saldance. They carried strange sigils sewn over old ones. A three-eyed skull wreathed in pale flame. When spooked, they scattered northward rather than south to ships. "Someone's paying them in secrets," she concluded. Paid enough to ignore coin. Jon felt the embers stir colder at that. A shadow conspiracy sought chaos. Frost storms in the far north, wyvern trade in the south, mercenaries with cryptic emblems roving the Midlands. Many fires kindled at once could burn a kingdom from all corners. He asked Arya to ride with Nymeria north. Her penchant for slipping through shadows would uncover more than scouts in plain mail. She agreed, though regret flashed that she would not yet feel Balerion's back beneath her. "Keep him alive till I return," she said, nodding at the dragon. "I've killed one king in darkness. I'd like to see the sun from his shoulders next time." 3 hours after midday, Balerion soared southwestward, Jon astride, Davos, and 2 Karstark outriders clinging to harness slings behind. Ghost took position near Jon's thigh, ears pressed flat by wind, eyes gleaming thrill. They followed the trident's silver scrawl toward the reach, passing over villages where peasants halted plows to gape upward. Jon kept altitude high. The thunder of wings alone sufficed to broadcast arrival without scorching fields. He learned quickly that the sight of a dragon might devastate livestock. Cows calved early, sheep stampeded. Better to cast shadow than flame. By dusk they camped on a crag above the Mander's upriver fork, old stone rings hinting at first men barrows long pillaged. Jon set no fire. Balerion's body heat sufficed to warm the rocky shelf. Air shimmering above scale. Davos nursed chapped lips with pear cordial. "Strange path we sail now," he mused, gazing at fireflies drifting like sparks across meadow. "When I smuggled onions, I never dreamed I'd perch on a dragon's shoulder with half the realm counting heartbeats till we coughed smoke." Jon cracked a faint smile. "I never dreamed I'd outlive Castle Black, much less ride the beast that forged the Iron Throne." Silence stretched companionable. Stars wheeled overhead, one new star flickering. A black absence rimmed with faint red, visible only when Jon let his eyes unfocus. He wondered if others saw it, or if it existed merely for those bound to the black dread. The ember in his chest seemed to beat in harmony with that dark star. Next morning they descended upon Coldmoat, an abandoned stronghold of House Stackhouse, now claimed by warring hedge lords. Balerion's landing shattered the drawbridge. Sellswards fled into fields, leaving plundered grain behind. Jon posted a proclamation on the gate: land restored to small folk with tithe remission for 3 years, provided they repair walls and swear neutrality. Then he left as quickly as he had come, taking nothing but broken shackles he found in the dungeon and tossing them into the moat where they sank with heavy finality. Over the course of a week, the same pattern repeated. At Bitterbridge he persuaded the Goldfoot Company to accept Stark coin in exchange for escorting refugees to Tumbleton, rather than looting their orchards. At Cider Hall, an outlaw band surrendered after Balerion circled thrice. Jon offered each man a choice between service as road wardens or exile across the narrow sea. Most chose service. Sir Adam's blank surcoat brigade grew to 80 by Raven's count. Not all encounters ended bloodless. Near Dusk Hollow, corrupt sheriff knights fired a scorpion bolt from a concealed wagon. Balerion veered, but the iron tip grazed his wing, drawing a line of liquid ember that hissed on grass. Jon felt the pain as though across his own back, a whip of magma under skin. Fury surged. He fought to quell Balerion's instinct to incinerate all. Instead, he directed a narrow jet of flame that traced the wagon wheels, melting them to slag without touching the horses. The sheriff and his men dropped weapons, weeping. Jon condemned them to rebuild burnt houses in villages they had taxed harshly, under guard of their own victims. Justice tempered with mercy became his signature. Ballads sprouted even faster than rumors. Still, each act of restraint weighed heavy. The ember burned hotter each time flame held in check, as though stockpiling. At night, Jon dreamed of iron thrones blooming like dark roses across fields of dead grass. Each petal a melted sword, each thorn a scream. He woke hoarse from shouting words he did not remember. Highgarden appeared on the horizon one emerald afternoon, Tyrell banners replaced with plain green cloth, bearing the sigil of Lady Olenna's distant cousin Lord Mathis Rowan, who held stewardship after the death of Garland Tyrell. The castle's famed golden roses had wilted in drought and neglect. Petals drooped like exhausted soldiers. Jon requested audience, landing Balerion beyond vineyard walls to spare precious vines. Lords and ladies gathered in the courtyard kept their distance, eyes wary but wondering. Lord Rowan, gray-haired and gaunt, welcomed Jon with stiff courtesy. They spoke in the western terrace amid trellises where bees droned. Rowan lamented bandits strangling trade routes, taxes owed to a crown no one wore, and fields lying fallow for want of manure, the old stables having burned during the sacking year. He feared the Reach might starve before next winter, if peace did not return. Jon listened, advised crop rotation borrowed from Northern Garen's grass practice, offered seeds carried by the Celtigar twins, and promised guarded caravan routes from Maidenpool. In exchange, he requested only shelter for refugees, and a battalion of archers trained but idle. Rowan agreed readily. A feast sealed the pact. Modest fare of river eel and honey bread, yet gratitude sweetened every bite. During the feast, a minstrel performed a haunting tune on high harp, lyrics new coined, when black of night wheels white of flame, and dire wolf rides dread's dark wing. The frozen spear will break again, if morning fails to sing. The chorus sent shivers along Jon's arms. He wondered who wrote such words. Someone who glimpsed the shape of future storms, or merely a poet chasing coin. When he asked the minstrel later, the man shrugged. Song rode a raven north, my lord. None claim its quill. Before Jon departed, Septalian, traveling separately, arrived with a wooden chest. Inside lay parchments inked by lords attending her preaching. Oaths of peace, they read, sworn not to a king, but to the principle that crops and children must be spared, whichever banners clashed. 50 signatures spanned 3 counties. Hope sprouted where fields had wilted. They flew onward to Storm's End, where gales smashed foam high against black sea walls. The Baratheon keep, still lordless after Stannis' fall and Renly's ghost, housed garrison mercenaries paid by grain wardens of the narrow sea. They opened gates reluctantly. Jon walked ramparts buffeted by wind, remembering nights atop the wall. It felt fitting, the last bastion between realm and raging storm. He told the captain, an Essosi veteran named Ser Craven, that the time of sellsword rule in ancestral halls neared end. Either the garrison might uphold the small folk's safety under charter of new peace, or quit the castle for coins Jon would supply. Craven, pragmatic, chose coin. Jon installed a local fisherman guild to oversee stores until a rightful Baratheon heir could be found. If any lived. He wondered whether Gendry, rumored forging steel in King's Landing's rubble, might accept such mantle. A thought for later. Returning north, they shadowed the King's Road, passing skirmishes snuffed by Balerion's mere presence. Yet one night, as camp set near the ruins of Fellwood, a scent of rot drifted on wind colder than latitude allowed. Ghost stiffened, hackles bristling. Balerion lifted his head, nostrils flaring. Jon peered into tree lines where moonlight barely reached. Out of darkness shuffled forms, half a dozen, then scores. Gray skin blotched with black frost, eyes burning pallid blue. Whites. Whites. How they survived the Night King's fall, Jon did not know. Perhaps shards of his will hid in crypt depths, awaiting new puppeteer. But here they marched, arms stiff, jaws slack. Jon sprang to saddle, even as Davos and the Karstarks formed a ring of torches. Balerion roared, a furnace-deep bellow that sent wild dogs whimpering miles away. The whites did not falter. Jon hesitated. Fire cleanses. But forest might ignite, destroying refuge for villages. He directed a contained gout of flame along a muddy gully, creating a trench of burning pitch between the undead and camp. Those whites already within line he met with Longclaw, Valyrian steel cleaving like dawnlight through frost. Sparks flew icy blue when blade touched their flesh. They fell, lifeless again. Ghost hamstrung another, white jaws snapping bone. When last corpse collapsed, silence throbbed under canopy. The trench hissed low. Jon examined one corpse. Under ragged cloak it wore black velvet trimmed in tarnished silver. Garb of a minstrel perhaps. Pinned at throat, a bronze brooch shaped as a three-eyed skull wreathed in pale flames. The same emblem Arya described. Dawn revealed hoofprints leading west. Too small for horses, maybe mules, dragging sledges heavy enough to rut the dirt. They pointed toward the old town of Hayford. Jon left Davos and most guards to protect the wounded Karstark who lost an arm. and flew with Balerion along the trail. He found a clearing where an obelisk of ice stood 15 feet high, veined with black cracks that pulsed faint blue. Around its base lay sickles crusted with blood, bundles of herbs, and bones of small animals arranged in spirals. Runic scratches marred the ground, foreign and yet familiar, a corruption of the same glyphs that summoned him to Valyria. These sang not of rebirth, but of consumption. A figure robed in midnight stepped from behind the obelisk, face unseen beneath a cowl, breath fogging though morning turned warm. Voice spilled like frost across glass. Ice remembers Targaryen's shade. You ride old fire, but old ice waits, balance tilts. A gloved hand touched the obelisk. Cracks brightened. Balerion growled. Smoke belching. Jon felt the ember flare. A furnace door kicked open. He shouted for the figure to stand down. Instead, the stranger sliced a palm over the ice, blood freezing midair into rubies. A wall of blue flame erupted, knocking Jon backward even atop the dragon. The blast stank of frozen rot. Balerion recoiled, wings beating defensive gusts. When haze cleared, the obelisk and stranger were gone, ground coated in hoarfrost that steamed under morning sun. Jon returned to camp, shaken. He ordered Davos to relay parchments describing the encounter to Maester Vaymond and Bran. If others manipulated fragments of White Walker magic, they threatened not only his fledgling peace but the realm's very soul. The council must know. They pressed east to Maidenpool, arriving to find tents multiplied into a bustling town. Refugee cooks hawked onion stew. Children chased each other with carved dragon toys. Soldiers drilled under Saradam. Yet anxiety hung like smoke. Rumors of white sighting had reached them, and of Qartheen wyverns sighted near the arbor. Even hope must dine with fear. Jon convened his council that evening in a great pavilion illuminated by lanterns shaped like paper lilies. Reports flew. Nymeria had skirmished along the Bay of Seals, confirming spectral storms. Arya infiltrated a cult north of Long Lake calling themselves Frost Shepherds, wearing the three-eyed skull. They spoke of a shattered king whose heart lay on the seabed beneath Hardhome. The Celtigar twins reported a Qartheen fleet anchoring at stepstones, cages of winged reptiles visible on decks. Their scale gleamed turquoise, their eyes black voids. Each tidbit sharpened the map of unseen threats. Maester Vaymond's raven arrived near midnight. The scroll trembled with urgency. Lord Snow, in the sealed vault of Dragonstone. I found partial translation of the sigil negative, the ancient treaty between flame and frost. It stipulates that if ever Dragonfire returns uncontested to skies of men, ice may reclaim equal breath, unless balanced by a heart forged of both. Such heart is rare beyond reason. Guard yours, and beware obelisks of breach. They anchor winter in summer soil. Jon closed his eyes. He remembered the crystal heart melting into his chest, the fusion of blood and molten memory. A heart forged of ice and fire. Balance incarnate, if he stood true. He drafted orders. Recall Nymeria south. Direct Celtigar cogs to Shadow Qartheen fleet, but avoid direct clash. Send ravens to Winterfell, asking Bran to investigate Shattered King lore. He tasked Septa Lyanne to raise prayer vigils, not for victory but for restraint. Flame unbridled could draw frost unbound. He dispatched scouts to find caches of dragonglass, long rumored in mountains of Dorne and hills of the Vale. If frost returned, they would need weapons older than steel. On the pavilion's threshold he paused. Candlelight cast Balerion's silhouette across canvas, monstrous yet protective. Jon felt the dragon's patience. Anvils do not hurry, yet they shape worlds. He addressed the weary faces. We have lit a beacon, he said. Shadows race toward it. Some seeking warmth, others eager to snuff it out. We will not retreat into night, nor blind ourselves with our own blaze. We walk the border, we who are ice and fire and storm and dawn. Hold fast to mercy, hold fast to strength. We are guardians of balance, not masters of dominion. His voice softened. And should balance break, let it be after we spent every breath to mend it. That night he stood beneath the dark star. now brighter, rim aglow with subtle flame, as if horizon itself wore a crown of paradox. The ember beat to its rhythm. Jon understood. Each act of compassion banked the twin fires inside him. Each lapse fanned them wild. So he whispered into wind promises of restraint. He thought of Sansa's careful rule, of Sam's laughter with little Sam, of Arya's quiet grin when she let fate slip between fingers and chose her own path. He thought of Daenerys once, on Dragonback above Meereen, how her face had shone with joy before politics curdled wonder into wrath. He would not repeat that tragedy. Fire must temper, not consume. Sleep came lightly. At first light, ravens croaked outside the tent. One bore a black ribbon, signifying urgent news from east. Jon broke the seal. It was from the Celtigar twins anchored off Crackclaw Point. Enemy fleet changed heading 2 hours past moonset. Sailing direct for Blackwater Bay. Anticipate landing at King's Landing ruins within 3 days. Wyvern cages uncovered. Raiders of Frost, Shepherd's sigil among deck crew. .ol. Numbers. 5 war dramans. 7 Wyvern barges, unknown mercenary escorts. Request immediate reinforcement. Flame alone may not suffice. Creatures rumored resistant to heat. Jon folded the note, jaw clenched. So frost and sail, aligned with scaled beasts, immune to flame. An alliance of antithesis. Perhaps orchestrated by the robed stranger. They aimed for the capital's corpse, maybe to seize Symbol and set it ablaze with unnatural cold. He summoned Davos, Adam, and Vaemond, who had arrived overnight, exhausted on a ship, racing the Raven, to outline a course. Balerion could fly to King's Landing in half a day, but one dragon might falter against wyverns bred to ignore flame. Yet time forbade waiting for Nymeria's return or Arya's next missive. Jon resolved. He would go, alone if need be, with Balerion and Ghost, to hold line until reinforcements arrived. Davos protested first, voice raw. A lone torch and hurricane, lad? Better to gather storm of our own. Jon placed a hand on the old knight's shoulder. This torch burns hotter than most storms. But I will not fight reckless, only stall and scout. To Sir Adam. March companies south by the King's Road. Pace hard, but not so harsh men falter. To Vaemond. Study every scrap on wyverns. Search for weakness beyond flame. Send rape? The maester nodded, rubbing temples. Before midday Balerion soared again, wings pumping turbulence that rattled tents. Jon gazed down as his army of farmers and orphans shrank to colored flecks. He prayed they would remain more than embers if he failed. Ghost crouched between neck ridges as ever, white against night-black scale. Jon stroked the wolf's fur, then bent mine to Balerion. Thoughts melded. Sea glinting like quicksilver, taste of upcoming battle like copper on tongue. Memory of storms over Valyria thrumming with power. They pressed south. Clouds gathered, strange and greenish. Lightning forked but made no thunder. Halfway along the Queen's Road they overtook a column of refugees trundling northward. Jon wheeled low enough to shout, "What drives you?" They screamed, pointing behind, toward the capital, muttering of serpents with wings and men whose breath smoked like tomb air. He saluted them with raised sword and drove ahead. Heart drumming, they reached Blackwater Bay under fading daylight. From high above he saw the ruins. 7 years had not cleansed the Red Keep's scorched bones, nor the blasted husk of the Sept. Weeds crawled through smashed tiles. Squatters' shanties huddled in shadow of broken towers. Smoke now rose anew, bonfires or worse. In the harbor, black-hulled ships flew the sigil. Three-eyed skull, cloaked in frost-hued flame. Wyverns wheeled overhead. 5. Six, wingspans half Balerions yet agile. Their scales glistened with slick sheen, not iridescent like dragons but waxy, water-beating. John banked, assessing. Their riders wore pale masks shaped like owl faces, eye slits dark. A shriek cut the air. One wyvern dived, jaws wide. Balerion rolled, heat rushing down throat. John yanked mentally. Not flame yet. Instead, the dragon's tail swung, catching the creature mid-chest. Bones popped. Rider tumbled. Another wyvern spat a stream of viscous fluid that hissed where it struck Balerion's flank. Smoking but not ablaze. Acid. John felt a sting, anger surging. He allowed a short burst of flame. It washed over the attacker, yet the wyvern screeched but did not ignite, skin blistering then sealing as if slime repelled burn. So rumor true. Heat-resistant hide. But blunt force still harmed them. John directed Balerion into a spiral, wings cutting downdraft that hammered wyverns into each other. Two collided, breaking necks. The others regrouped. From the ship decks, archers loosed arrows tipped with glassy blue crystals. Several struck Balerion's belly, piercing scale. John felt each like frost daggers. Blood the color of molten iron dripped but not heavily. Still, concern gnawed. Unknown toxins? He ordered Balerion to land atop the hill of Rainey's ruined septita. They smashed through shattered roof, perching among cracked statues of the maiden and the crone. Wyverns circled. Ghost leapt to rubble, snarling. A hornblast echoed from the harbor. A deep, mournful note. John saw a figure on the flagship's foredeck, tall, robed in midnight like the obelisk summoner. Hands lifted, conjuring swirling shards of ice above the bay. Water around hulls froze, spreading outward with unnatural speed. A mirror of black glass creeping up pilings. John realized their aim: to freeze the black water, trapping Balerion on land where wyverns had advantage amid ruined streets too narrow for dragon wings. If ice reached banks, small folk sheltering in tenements would be caught between serpents and frost. Decision made. John urged Balerion aloft, ignoring wyverns to dive toward the flagship. Arrows clattered harmlessly. At 20 yards he unleashed full furnace, a cannon of white-hot fire so intense it blazed even the wyvern's slime coating. The first wave vaporized before they could dodge. Flesh bubbled, wings shredded. Move closer, hotter. Their resistance had limits. Flame bathed the sorcerer's obelisk of ice, which cracked. Shrieking, the midnight figure raised arms, perhaps to shield. But the obelisk exploded, shards flinging outward like razors. Several embedded in Balerion's chest, others shattered deck planks, spearing crew. The sorcerer vanished amid mist of steam and splinters. Ice across bay fractured, reverting water to churning waves that tossed ships. John pivoted, scanning for the midnight figure, but only pieces of black cloth floated away. Wyverns, leaderless, screeched and fled southward. Those still aloft limped on tattered wings, leaving streaks of acidic spittle that burned holes in collapsed rooftops. Balerion banked back to Sept Hill, landing amidst swirling dust. Blood still oozed around blue crystal bolt tips lodged in his belly. John dismounted, drawing blade. Ghost sniffed crystals, growling. Frost rimed the rubble around each wound despite summer air. John snapped one shaft, yanking out the barb. Balerion grunted but stayed still. The fragment chilled John's fingertips through leather. He hurled it away. Stone smoked where it landed. They spent the night in the ruins while Davos and Adam's columns marched hard toward the city. John posted Ghost to prowl. Balerion rested, healing slower than usual, perhaps stymied by lingering frost magic. John pressed his palm over the largest wound, willing warmth through the bond. Ember flared, searing pain shot up his arm, but heat suffused scale beneath. The ice pitted and melted. Blood flowed freer, then clotted. At dawn, John looked upon the skyline. Red Keep's husk glowed amber under sunrise, smoke dissipating from harbor. Refugees crept from hiding, staring at the great dragon perched above like a gargoyle. Some knelt, others wept. John raised Longclaw in silent salute. A chant began, ragged yet swelling. Dawn. 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 It echoed between ruins, a sunrise of voices. He felt the ember quiet, content, yet far beyond the horizon, in frozen wastes where Bran's ravens wheeled, shards of night reorganized themselves, pieces seeking new shape. The war for balance continued. As Balerion lifted into morning sky to meet incoming allies, Jon understood new purpose, not merely to hold light against dark, but to weave both into tapestry neither side could tear asunder. Dragon and direwolf, ice and fire, dread and dawn join. And so they flew, wings painting gold across rubble, while small folk below traced the arc of hope, whispering that perhaps this time the story would not end in ash nor snow, but in fertile soil, watered by the sweat of those who dared guard the fragile bloom of peace. Ka. Steam drifted over the shattered steps of Baelor's sept, curling through shattered archways like pale ribbon, pooling in shadows where tumbled marble had lain since the bells tolled their last. Jon stood beneath a broken rose window, whose petals of stained glass glittered underfoot, fragments catching sunrise reds and purples. Each shard reflected a sliver of Balerion's looming wing, and above, pigeons wheeled in uneasy circles, their feathers frosted with ash stirred loose by yesterday's fires. He surveyed the square. Small folk, thin as spent candles and clad in patchworked rags, knelt among piles of rubble. Some clutched wilted flowers, others held infants, eyes wide, hollowed by hunger and fear. Their whispers floated toward him like wind-worn prayers. Dragon Lord? Protector? Dawnbringer? Jon's pulse thudded at the unfamiliar titles, but he swallowed caution. Titles mattered less than deeds now. Sir Davos arrived with Sir Adam, flanked by 20 new recruits in mismatched mail, survivors of the Crownlands who had dragged their rust-flecked swords from hiding to stand sentinel beside the Black Dragon. Behind them strode Maester Vaimund, breath wheezing, yet his one good eye blazed with urgent light. The wyverns fled south at sunset, Davos reported, wiping soot from his beard. No sails on the horizon this morn. The harbor folk reckon you burned off half their crew. He forced a grim smile. Almost makes me pity the bastards. Pity can wait, Jon said, gaze fixed on the folk in the square. We need healers and grains. Those wyverns bit more than soldiers. He gestured toward a collapsed wine shop where wounded lay on pallets. If the city's to stand, it starts with them. Vaimund shuffled forward, rolling a brittle parchment. The bolts you drew from Balerion, crystals forged with ice heart glass. I scraped residue. It leaches warmth. Slows clotting, mixed with ground frost lotus from shivering sea. Whoever armed those ships has recipes beyond Maester's reach. He tapped the cracked marble at his feet. But heat can still break it. Dragonfire, or your own blood's ember. We must fashion salves before another volley lands. Jon nodded. Set up cauldrons in the Guildhall ruins. Melt iron shards with coals, mix in ash bark and pine tar. We'll craft paste to draw the cold. Adam bowed. I'll organize smiths, those still able. He strode off, barking orders. Ghost trotted beside Jon, muzzle flecked red from wounds cleaned overnight. The direwolf's eyes swept the edges of the crowd, wary but calm. Children reached timid hands to touch his fur. Ghost allowed it, tail twitching like a banner in gentle breeze. Jon stepped onto a chunk of toppled architrave and raised his voice, letting it carry. No king rules these stones. No taxes bind you. But hunger does. Fear does. We will build grain kitchens here, in the sept's shadow. Feed will come from Highgarden caravans, from Maidenpool storehouses, from Dorne's dry granaries once convoys arrive. Until then, share what you have, and our guards will keep markets fair. Any man hoarding grain for profit will answer to the dragon. Men attend. A murmur swept through the throng. Tentative applause, tearful laughter, a baby's startled cry. Jon dismounted the ruin and strode toward the wounded. A girl with a scorch across her cheek stared up as he knelt, offering her a water skin. She whispered hoarsely, "Is he the Black Dread?" Jon smiled faintly. He was. Now he's your shield. As Vaimund gathered apothecaries, A shadow cooled the square. Balerion shifted, great neck lowering until his eye, the color of doused coals, met Joan's. Through their link flowed a pulse of curiosity tinged with melancholy. John sensed the dragon's confusion. This city once cowered beneath his flame. Now it leaned upon him. John laid a hand on Skull's warm snout. "Times change," he murmured. Balerion's breath gusted, rustling banners that lay long sunken in dust. A horn blared from the gate of the gods. Adam's scouts galloped in, cloaks snapping. Their captain dismounted, panting. "My lord." We sighted frost obelisks along the Roserad. 3 pillars, each taller than a warhorse, encased in hoar crystals. Trees around them wither overnight. He swallowed. "And corpses walk patrol. 2 of my men fell. The whites carried them off toward the pillars." John's knuckles whitened. Frost shepherds spread their anchor stones south, poisoning fertile ground. "Gather riders," he ordered Adam. "We ride at dusk. I take Balerion overhead. If they breach the reach, harvests die before they grow." Vaimond sniffed. "Obelisks draw power from land. Destroying one may unleash surge of cold. We need a counterpulse." John exhaled. "Heartfire," he said quietly. "From me." He remembered the pain healing Balerion's wounds. Heat drawn from within. Vaimond's brow furrowed. "Risky. Burn too bright and you consume yourself. Better that than watch an age of ice swallow fields." He turned to Davos. "Hold the city. Feed them. If wyverns return, defend with scorpions on ramparts." He looked at the square's trembling folk. "See, they have hope to guard." The old knight clasped his forearm. "I'll keep the embers glowing, lad. Go light your beacons." John climbed to Balerion's back. Ghost leapt behind, lips peeling in silent snarl at memory of whites. The dragon crouched, wings spread, and with a thunderous blast, they shot skyward, dust spiraling beneath. They raced along the King's Road, Balerion's shadow veiling groves of cedar and the crumbling bones of old manors. As daylight waned, temperature dropped. John tasted frost ahead despite midsummer sun at his back. Then he saw it. A white spear thrust into earth, rimed in crystals that refracted dying light like a prismatic crown. Around its base milled whites, dozens, dragging fresh corpses into a ring. Adam's riders approached from the south, torches flaring. John signaled them wide. Balerion banked and landed with earthquake force within bowshot of the obelisk. Undead heads jerked toward him. Empty eyes glowed. They surged, clambering over each other. John swung down, drew Longclaw, advanced alone. Heat radiated from the dragon behind, yet icy wind funneled off the obelisk. With each step, John felt the embers stir, heat building under sternum. Whites lunged. He cleaved them, blades singing in frosted air. Their bodies burst into brittle shards upon contacting the blade's rippling edge of blackened quicksilver metal, yet more advanced, drawn by the obelisk's silent command. Within 10 paces, cold stabbed his marrow. Breath plumed like steam. The pillar hummed, emitting faint choral notes that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. John sheathed Longclaw, slipped off one glove, and pressed bare palm against his chest. He inhaled deeply, focusing on ember. Bran once taught him in a quiet godswood meditation. See the fire, guide it, not as torch, but as river. He drew that river now, channeling warmth along his arm until veins glowed faintly through skin. He extended his hand toward the obelisk. A beam of pale red-orange light shot forth. Not flame, not tangible, but a thermal tide that rippled the air like desert mirage. The obelisk shrieked, surface fracturing with spiderweb cracks. Frost shepherd runes flared azure in desperate protest. John stepped closer, pouring more heat until sweat sizzled off brow, despite frigid wind. Behind, Balerion roared, adding a bellows of flame arcing overhead, scorching whites that sought to flank. Wind extinguished the worst, but enough heat cascaded into the pillar. With a crack like glacier calving, its apex shattered. Shards slumped inward, melting to a slushy heap. A sonic wave rolled out, hurling John back. He landed hard, armor clanging, breath knocked free. Silence fell except for snapping twigs and hiss of steam. Where the obelisk stood remained a circular basin of slushy water. Wights froze mid-motion, eyes dimming. They toppled lifeless, strings cut. Adam's riders erupted in cheers. John rose unsteadily. A numbness crept along his left arm. Skin reddened, as if sunburned. Heartbeat sluggish. He shook fingers until feeling returned. Balerion nosed him, concern pulsing through bond. "I'm whole," John whispered, though dizziness blurred horizon. Adam dismounted, offering a flask. John sipped oak-aged brandy and regained bearings. "One pillar," the knight muttered. "Two more ahead. We spare horses the cold," John decided. "You ride cleanup, burn corpses. I take the dragon to pillars 2 and 3. He caught Adam's look of worry. "I will not overdraw the ember again. Flame alone may suffice now that we know their limit." Adam placed gauntlet on John's shoulder. "Just come back breathing. Stark or Dragon Lord, you're still needed." John clasped the hand, nodded, and mounted. The second obelisk rose in a wheat field where stalks rustled in gelid breeze, frost tipping the heads white. Wyvern riders circled it, spraying acidic vomit that hardened into crystalline crust over soil. John directed Balerion to slam into them, wings folded, like a living battering ram. The dragon's momentum crushed one wyvern outright. Another spiraled away, limb torn. John loosed controlled flame bursts, driving riders scattering. He then targeted the obelisk's midsection with a lance of dragonfire, so focused it glowed blue-white. Stone erupted. The frost sonic wave blasted outward again, but John hovered above its radius. Third pillar stood on a low hill, dotted with barrows older than the Andals. Strangely, no wights defended it. As John approached, the midnight figure appeared, cloak billowing unnaturally despite still air. He raised both hands, palms glowing azure. Ice lunged upward, forming a twisting javelin that shot toward Balerion's heart. John shouted Valyrian command. Balerion barrel rolled, the spear skimming along scales, spraying shards. John dove, leapt from saddle mid-air, landing on the hill not 3 paces from the sorcerer. Longclaw flashed. The stranger produced a dagger of translucent ice, parrying with eerie grace. Each clash left rime crawling the Valyrian steel, only to sizzle away in sparks of ember. "Why tear the land that is not yours?" John growled. The midnight figure's voice seeped like melting snow. "Land is fiction. Balance real. Fire returns. Ice answers. Do not meddle. Heart forged. Let cycle freeze anew." "No may." John slashed again, forcing him back. "Balance requires life." He feinted, cut high, scoring the sorcerer's mask. Splinters chipped, revealing a face beneath. Pallid skin traced with faint, scaly patterns, eyes a luminous pale green fringed with icy lashes. Not quite human. The sorcerer hissed, retreating to obelisk, pressing palm against it. Cracks shot outward, birthing swirling frost that coalesced into armored wights rising from barrow earth. Ancient kings wearing rusted iron circlets. John sidestepped, decapitating the first before it fully stood. But more emerged. Balerion landed behind, anvil heavy, tail sweeping ranks into tatters. The sorcerer shrieked, plunging the ice dagger into the pillar's core. Obelisk and sorcerer both dissolved into a torrent of slush that streamed downhill, freezing again mid-flow into grotesque statues of half-formed faces. John felt the ember flare wild, untamed impulse to finish this foe forever. But he reined the urge. Pillar broken. The frost threat here waned. He would hunt the sorcerer later. Now people needed fields unchilled. They returned to camp near dawn. John slid from saddle, landing heavier than usual. Exhaustion clung like frostbite. Bemont hurried up, pressing a vial of thick amber liquid. Dragon pepper infusion. John drank. Warmth spread, but limbs still trembled. "You spent heart fire too much," the maester chided. "Your blood thins. Rest or risk burnout." John nodded, He found a quiet corner in dilapidated tower, lay on straw with ghost curled at feet. Sleep seized him like drowning. He dreamed of Bran seated under a vast weirwood, whose leaves were shards of obsidian, veins glowing cerulean. Bran's voice echoed, "Shattered king stirs deep. Ice binds to broken crown, seeking rider as fire found you. Beware the seabed heart." Jon tried to speak, but words turned to frost vapor. He woke hours later to Nymeria sand shaking his shoulder. She smelled of salt journey and horse sweat. "Message from the north," she said. Arya vanished near Hardhome. Last Raven claims she pursued a group of masked strangers onto a ghost ship. Jon sat upright, vertigo shooting through skull. Hardhome, north of the wall. Seabed heart. He stood, ignoring dizziness. How soon can we sail? Nymeria's brow creased. 3 days to Muster Bay for fastest galleys. Storms gather beyond Skagos, waters half ice. Then, we fly. Jon strode toward courtyard where Balerion fed on freshly slaughtered oxen. Nymeria trailed. But the Reach harvest convoys. Adam will escort them. Jon cut out. Davos holds city. You take command of Crownland's garrisons until my return. I trust your blade. He paused. And your conscience. Nymeria inclined her head, expression unreadable. Bring her back. Snow King. And bring answers. Southland's fray thinner each day. Jon fitted saddle, tightened straps. He debated taking soldiers, but speed mattered. He whistled. Ghost bounded onto stirrup lip, settling. Balerion rumbled as Jon mounted. The horizon north flickered with distant stormlight, a bruise on the sky. They launched at sunset, chasing the tinge of violet that marks day's last exhale. The flight north felt longer than first toward Valyria, though leagues fewer, for burden weighed heavier. Jon dozed in snatches, waking when Ghost growled at passing thunderheads. Stars blurred. The dark star seemed to lead, pulsing slightly brighter as if urging on. Crossing the wall at Eastwatch, they found garrison torches, mere pinpricks, amid swirling snow. Jon circled once, spotting Lord Commander Tormund Giantsbane waving from parapet, Redbeard gone gray. He considered landing but pressed on. Time bled fast. Balerion followed coastlines where cliffs glowed faintly with eerie blue frost. Twice they spied icebergs shaped like spires moving counter to currents, as though steered by unseen oars. Hardhome appeared under moonless gloom. A desolation of charred timbers, stone foundations buried beneath pack ice, and ships wrecked on rocky shoals like white ribs jutting from dark water. Yet amidst ruin twinkled pale turquoise lights dancing along half-glassed waves. Wyvern barges anchored offshore, masts festooned with skull banners. And there, center of cove, rose a colossal ice obelisk as tall as the wall, its apex lost in low cloud. At its base flickered a sigil carved in negative flame. Three-eyed skull crowned in horns of frost. Balerion circled high. Jon scanned deck of the largest barge. Masked figures chanted around chained prisoners. Scores of them. Ragged northerners, wildlings, maybe captured Night's Watchmen. At the front knelt a slender shadow with short dark hair bound in rag. Arya. Jon's stomach clenched. He angled Balerion into steep dive. Wind screamed. The dragon's roar shattered night hush. Archers loosed arrows. Most burned midair. Jon aimed for the deck. At last instant he leapt, rolling as Balerion veered to rake another ship. He landed amid chaos, long claw flashing, severing chains with 2 strokes. Prisoners scattered toward companionways. Masked cultists drew curved blades of frost steel. Jon parried, blades chipping but holding. He advanced, slashing efficient arcs. One cultist lunged. Ghost erupted from nowhere, jaws crushing windpipe. Arya surged upright, freeing herself with hidden dagger, eyes blazing. "About bloody time," she hissed. Though grin glinted, she snatched a sword from fallen foe. Dragonglass hilted. and fell into step with Jon. They fought back to back, cutting a radius clear. Across the deck, the Midnight Sorcerer emerged, flanked by armored wights taller than bearmen. He spread arms. Icy gust extinguished torches. Arya cursed. Jon stepped forward. "Release them," he demanded. "Stand down your frost dream." The sorcerer's laugh crackled. "Heart-forged thinks love outweighs law. Fire rises, ice answers. Flesh feeds cycle." He drew from his robe a shard of black ice pulsing with inner light, the seabed heart. He lifted it. Clouds swirled into a vortex overhead. Arya whispered, "Distract him." She vanished into shadow like smoke. Jon strode, meeting White's charge. He ducked under a frosthammer swing, drove Longclaw through mail and rib, severing glowing tendons. He felt embers surging but held, focusing on blade work. Balerion roared outside, tail smashing masts, wyvern shrieks rent air. The sorcerer chanted. Lines of blue fire snaked along deck planks toward Jon, freezing boards. Jon dodged left, slipping on rime. The sorcerer thrust shard upward. Lightning of blue-white shot into sky, connecting with dark star overhead. The star brightened, rays spilling like spears. Pain stabbed Jon's chest. The ember responded, flaring hotter than forge bellows. He gasped, knees buckling. Vision doubled. Any moment, the fire might rip free, leaving hollow ash. A blur flashed, Arya springing from rigging. Blade poised. She plunged dagger into the sorcerer's right shoulder. The shard tumbled from his grasp, clattering across deck. Arya twisted blade, rolled away as frost exploded outward, forming jagged spikes. The sorcerer screamed, half frozen, half bleeding black viscous fluid. Jon staggered to shard, grasped it. Cold stabbed marrow, but ember countered. He raised it, intending to crush, when voice whispered inside head. Not the sorcerer, but deeper, older. Join. Balance. Dot. He saw image of molten heart, merging with frozen one. Forging crystal, neither fire nor ice. A tool to seal cycle, rather than break. He hesitated. Could such union chain him, enslaving will? Arya shouted, "Jon, drop it!" Whites closed in. He made choice. Snarling, he slammed shard under heel, driving it into deck. Ember channeled down limb, igniting black ice from within. A shockwave erupted. Half flame, half frost, blasting whites to shards. Splitting mast. The sorcerer shrieked as ice splintered from his body. Then with crack like glacier shattering, he dissolved into vapor. Deck buckled. Jon grabbed Arya, sprinted. Time to fly. They leapt railing as barge fractured. Balerion swooped, catching them on broad back. Ghost scrambled up via harness. Below, the colossal obelisk groaned. Without seabed heart's anchorage, its glow dimmed. Fissures racing. It toppled, smashing into frozen surf, splintering into bergs. Waves surged, slapping hulls aside like toys. Balerion climbed above tempest. Jon and Arya clung, soaked in brine. Lightning crackled between cloud and sea, yet star overhead dimmed a prior faint glow. Cycle disrupted, perhaps balanced anew. They landed on cliff, overlooking Hardhome ruins. Survivors, wildlings and watch, gathered in disbelief at the dragon saved them. Jon tended Arya's shallow wounds, pressing heated hands along gashes till clotting took. She nudged him. "So, that's 2 times I've stabbed death for you." He laughed, ragged but genuine, hugging her hard. Dawn painted the horizon, pink bleeding into steel blue. Balerion rested, threads of steam rising from nostrils. Jon felt ember calm, drained yet steady. The shard's destruction seemed to ease internal pressure, as though ice and fire acknowledged stalemate. But questions remained. Who crafted shard? What force above summoned this cycle? Bran might know. Jon resolved to convene at Winterfell, gather branded allies, and chart next defense. Rebuild harvests, root out remaining Frost Shepherd cells, negotiate with Carthene for Wyvern truce, or break their trade routes forever. As sun crested, Jon addressed gathered wildlings, watchmen, and freed prisoners. The long wars of fire and ice do not end with one battle. But every heart that chooses life over cycle weakens the storm. We will rebuild shelters here, plant sea corn fields on thawed soil, and guard coast with watchfires. If night returns, we answer together. We answer together. Cheering rose, hesitant but growing. A child offered him a rough pine carving of dragon atop direwolf. Jon accepted, throat tight. He glanced at Arya, who smiled crookedly. "Looks like you found your sigil," she teased. Later, standing alone at cliff edge, he gazed where obelisk fragments floated out to sea, melting under newborn sun. Ghost padded beside him, pressing warmth. Balerion silhouette filled half the sky, yet in the beast's rumble Jon sensed contentment. A predator at peace, guardian watching fledglings. Jon breathed crisp air, felt ember flicker soft inside. Balance held. Fragile, precious, but real. And so, as gulls wheeled and glaciers calved distant thunder, Jon Snow, rider of reborn Balerion, vowed that the Age of Dread would birth an Age of Dawn, not through domination of either element, but through the forging of both into something new. A heart strong enough to beat for all living things between snow and flame. K. Ah. A hush settled over Hardhome's ravaged cove long after dawn, broken only by the distant hush-rush of waves gnawing the shingle and the faint clatter of shattered ice drifting out to sea like funeral barges. Jon stood atop a scarp of black shale that overlooked the water, the salt wind raw against half-healed burns on his jaw, and tried to measure the hour by the brightness of the pale northern sun. Days this far beyond the wall were strange things, stretched, colorless, as though time itself held its breath. Below, freed captives combed wreckage for salvageable planks. Every length of timber counted, for most huts here had been torn apart by wind or fire in seasons past. Farther inland, spears of thin peat smoke rose from cookfires, where the wildlings gutted the last of the wyverns Balerion had slain in the night, their greasy hides hissing as flames licked what even wolves would not eat. Arya limped up the incline with Ghost ranging ahead as scout. She had a new shirt hacked from the stealth gray sail of one of the barges, its sleeves rolled past the elbows. In her fist she carried the sea dragon dagger she'd plucked from the Frost Shepherd cultist. Blade sharp as daylight, hilt set with tiny frozen pearls that no longer shimmered the way they had when the ice magic coursed. She jabbed at the dirt as she walked, carving grooves into shale. "Ribs still ache," she muttered when she drew level. Jon extended a waterskin filled with warmed mead. She took a swig, wiped her mouth on the back of her hand, then glanced at the cove where Balerion dozed, wings tented to protect half a dozen toddlers who'd crawled under his belly for shelter from wind. The children had squealed with delight every time the dragon snorted steam. Now they slept, cocooned by heat that rolled off his hide in visible waves. "You ever imagine we'd see anything like that?" Arya's tone held wonder rather than fear. Jon followed her gaze. "If I'm honest, I thought I'd never see you outside Winterfell's walls again, once you took ship for Bravos." He forced a smile. "Guess we're both hard to kill. Stubborn, Father would call it." Arya's laugh was brittle, quickly gone. "And there's whole continents worth of trouble left. You felt the tremor when that shard exploded. Something deeper than ice cracked." And Jon nodded. The ember behind his ribs, quiet since dawn, flickered in agreement. "Vaimon will want to dig for songs in older tongues, but lore alone's no shield. Hardhome still needs walls, and King's Landing needs grain, and the Frost Shepherds may raise more pillars anywhere the ground's cold enough. Then we hunt." Arya flipped the dagger once, caught it by the blade, and offered hilt first. "Here. No use hoarding trophies. Carve new laws with it if you must." Jon closed her fingers back around the grip. "Keep it. Northern steel suits northern hands." She shrugged, slid the dagger through her belt, then squinted at the horizon. Low clouds bruised the eastern sky, violet black, lit beneath by weird turquoise pulses, as if thunderheads nursed their own auroras. "You think that's the last of them?" she asked quietly. "Storms travel in packs." John exhaled, tasting iron at the back of his throat. "But we broke their anchor. Without the seabed heart to yoke the old magic, every new pillar will burn faster. We just have to keep pace." Ghost trotted back, hackles only half raised now, tongue lolling in what passed for good spirits. He pressed against Joan's thigh, then dropped a sun-bleached femur at Arya's feet, one of the defunct whites perhaps. She wrinkled her nose, booted it downhill. They watched it roll, end over end, until it disappeared into the churned slush near the waterline. At mid-morning, Tormund Giantsbane arrived with 24 rangers and half again as many wildlings from the lonely hills, trudging over the ridge on shaggy garrons. The big man's beard dripped icicles that jingled when he grinned. "You make habit of waking to fresh legends, crow boy," he boomed, clouting John on the shoulder hard enough the bruise would flower by night. Spotting Balerion, he puffed his chest. "Big beast. Would take barrels of milk to fill that belly. No teats up here large enough." "We'll settle for oxen," John replied dryly. "Or stray krakens, if you know where any swim." Tormund laughed, then sobered, his gaze sweeping the freed folks' ragged camps. So many ghosts. These people lost kin when the dead rose under the last cold king. Now new shadows stalk them. Was it truly the same breath? Or something worse, wearing an old mask? "Then fragments," John admitted. "Pieces of the long night still searching for shape, but they're shape enough in a full belly and a roof." "That's our first battle." Tormund eyed the scattered lumber piles, nodded approval, and ordered his men to start hauling timbers. By midday, Joan's impromptu war council convened near a half-intact longhall, where battered shingles afforded enough shade for writing tables. The members, Tormund, Val the wildling princess, having arrived with a small escort bearing root vegetables and dried elk strips, Cotter Pike of Eastwatch, face stitched by a recent wyvern talon, but grimly alive, Sister Danzel, a haggard septa who'd survived the slave pens and now tended the sick, and Maester Vymond, coaxed north by a raven but still wheezing from shipwreck. Arya sat cross-legged on a cask, sharpening her dagger. Ghost slept near the doorway. Any intrusion would be met by sunlight-white teeth. John unrolled crude maps, inked on sailcloth. "Our priorities: shelter before next frost, patrol routes from Skagos south to the gorge, and secure grain lanes across the Bay of Seals. If we can establish Hardhome as a trade post, ships from White Harbor can dock safely. That gives survivors purpose and kingdom, the northern timber it lacks." Cotter Pike grunted. "Bays choked with drift ice half the year. Need beacon fires every mile or captains lose nerve." "Beacon fires mean towers," Val agreed. "Towers need mortar, nails, rope, and men not afraid of heights." "Free folk climb mountains to hunt goats," Tormund retorted. "We'll climb a few sticks on the shore, easy." Maester Vymond coughed into a kerchief, then cleared his throat. "And what of the frost shepherd remnants? Break stone, another sprouts. Rumor suggests cells in Ibn, in Tall Trees Town, even whispers in Volantis shadow markets." "Nymeria leads Crownland's garrisons," John answered. "Shall dispatch sandriders across the stepstones, lean on the Carthene wyvern masters. If we disrupt their supply of heart glass and frost lotus, the cult loses teeth." He looked at Vymond. "But I need the text. Sigil negative. Fully translated. Find the fail state they fear." The maester bowed, already scratching idle quills across parchment margins. Arya flipped her dagger, caught it flat. "I can track whispers too. Haven't forgotten faces, even if some now hide under bone masks." She met Joan's gaze. An unspoken question lingered. He shook his head slightly for patience. One predator at a time. They adjourned to physical labor. John hauled beams until dusk, muscles knotting, but sweat purged the ache of last night's fury. Balerion aided by pulling entire ship ribs from shallows with his teeth, stacking them like kindling. Children cheered from roofs every time plank splintered free. At one point, the dragon paused, sniffing sky, then rumbled. A deep note John interpreted as stormfront. Dark clouds boiled offshore. Wind swung north, sharp with ice. They'd need walls soon. Night found John perched on cliff again, scribbling letters by lantern. To Sansa, updating on Hardhome reclamation. To Davos, instructing distribution of King's Landing sewers, bricks for makeshift stoves. To Nymeria, authorizing her to treat with the Triarchs of Atlantis if they aided blockade of frost smuggling. He sealed each with wax, bearing the direwolf crowned by 3 dragon heads, though the seal still felt alien to his hand. A flare of flame cut the dark. Balerion lighting driftwood to warm laborers below. Sparks spiraled heavenward, mingling with far northern lights that shimmered green on the horizon. John felt ember hum in response. Not dangerous, simply aware. A heartbeat echoing cosmos. Footsteps crunched shale. Val approached, hair pale gold in lantern glow, furs cinched by woven grass rope. She carried a bowl of steaming hare stew. Your belly growls louder than that beast, she said, pressing the bowl into his hands. John accepted. I keep forgetting to eat. My sister's boy once forgot too. He died thin as a ghost. She sat beside him, gaze on the lights. Free folk are wary of dragon wings. They cast long shadows, but they saw how you spared prisoners, how you melted shackles. They'll follow deeds, not banners. I don't want thralls. John murmured around a mouthful of stew. Only neighbors who won't feed children to cold gods. Val studied him. Some worship cold because heat burned them first. The frost shepherds promise order, same as your dragon promises shield. Difference is whether followers rise or break under that promise. And now, John pondered that in silence. The lights overhead shifted to lavender streaks. He finished stew, handed her the bowl. Tomorrow we start on Beacon Towers. Tomorrow, she agreed and slipped back into darkness. Sleep claimed him on a bedroll placed near Balerion's foreleg, the dragon's low breathing like surf. In dream, he walked a labyrinth of ice and fire, walls alternating obsidian and frozen water. At the center, Bran waited beside a tree wrought of crystal, half burning, half frost. Bran's voice sounded like wind through direwolf fur. Choice remains. Forge tree, whole or shatter it. Hearts beat only if rhythm shared. John opened his mouth, but his voice cracked to frost dust. He woke sweating. Pre-dawn gloom draped camp. Ghost whined softly. Balerion's eye watched. Gleam reflected from a distant lightning lance. Storm broke mid-morning. Sleet lashing slopes, turning paths to treacherous slush. Work halted. John ordered fires banked under tarps. The gale lasted until nightfall, leaving a crust of ice on every rope and plank. Yet beacon frames still stood. Their silhouettes looked like skeletal fingers clawing at the low gray sky. But hope hides in bones, too. 3 days they toiled thus. Maester Vymond finished translating sigil negative fragments. He delivered them to John in the half-roofed hall. Scrolls weighted by stones. A pact older than Valyria, he said, voice hoarse. Fire and ice, bound by mutual annihilation clause. Dragons rise when walkers fall, and vice versa. The heart forged, a vessel of both, stands outside the cycle. But if vessel dies, equilibrium resets. The world may freeze and burn in endless alternations, tearing itself apart. Then Shawand. John's pulse thudded. So they'd rather kill me than risk dragons stabilizing? Vaimon nodded. Or bend you, turn your ember cold. Link it to frost. Prolong their half of cycle. John recalled that whisper. Join. He shivered, though campfires roared. Then training must continue, he said. I can't be bent if I learn to bend myself first. He sought solitude on seaward bluffs, practicing. At first he coaxed the ember into fingertips until skin glowed faint. Then he cooled it with controlled breaths, retreating flame before it scorched nerve. Hours passed. Sometimes heat surged unpredictably, but gradually he shaped it into pulses, like smith hammering red-hot steel, then quenching. Ghost observed, cocking head. Arya, returning from patrol. practiced balancing snowballs on her palm until he finished, then hurled one to his neck with a grin. "Forge that!" News trickled by Raven. Nymeria reported the Carthene magisters agreed to halt wyvern exports if guaranteed safe spice routes through the stepstones. She'd dispatched Dornish corsairs as escorts. Davos wrote of grain kitchens feeding thousands in the capital and Balerion's absence stirring fools to peace faster than fear did. "Your dragon frightens, but your pledge of no flaming keeps panic at bay." Sansa's handwriting said Winterfell's harvest looked promising, though Karstarks heard rumors that the Shattered King's evangelists preached repentance in lonely weirwood groves. They paint their faces with ground heart glass. Bran warns they seek relics buried in Wintertown barrows. Lastly, Bran himself wrote, a note so short it chilled Jon more than full parchment. "Tides turn. Seek Mirror Lake, north of Last River. Bring Heart of Fire and Glass of Ice. Their roots meet sky." Jon showed Arya and Tormund. The wildling shrugged. Mirror Lake could be Locher's pool or the moon's eye. Old wives say you can see tomorrow in its surface if you kneel midnight. Arya twirled her knife. Or see whoever means to kill you. They decided. When Hardhome's first trade ship arrived safe, Jon would ride Balerion south to Winterfell, gather Bran, then strike east to Last River. Ship arrived sooner than hoped. The Sea Arrow, a cog from White Harbor, navigated the iced shoals flags unfurled. Holds carried barley, casks of salt pork, crates of iron nails. Its captain kissed the beach's black stones, weeping to see the Black Dread standing guard instead of devouring Hull. Trade token exchanged, cheers rose. That night, Jon addressed the settlement, now near 800 souls, inside the long hall. Torch glow warming faces. Hardhome is now Hearthome, he announced. A hearth for all who refuse night's call. We will raise palisade and tower lights seen from Skagos to Bear Island. In spring, ships of every banner may dock under equal bargain. Food for timber, cloth for ore. But no chains, no heart glass. Any who trade death will answer to dragon and direwolf. Then Noir. Oz thundered. Tormund hefted a barrel of mead, smashed the lid, and declared feast. Fiddles screeched, mothers spun. Children petted Ghost until his patience expired, and he retreated under a table gnawing a bone the length of Jon's arm. After midnight, Jon slipped outside. Snow fell soft, catching torchlight like drifting embers. He walked to Balerion's slumbering form and pressed his forehead to the huge jaw. Through their link he communicated the plan. South, then east. The dragon's dreams rippled images. Green forests, red-leafed trees rooted in crystal, then sky black with twin comets. One flame, one ice. Jon understood this as anxious ascent. Dawn-painted clouds rose in jade when Jon, Arya, and Ghost mounted. Tormund clasped Jon's arm. "We keep hearth burning. Don't tarry, else I'll marry your dragon and make little frost lizards." "You'll need a stepladder," Jon quipped. He thanked Val, thrusting into her hands a carved direwolf figurine for the wildling children. She kissed his cheek in reply, leaving a smudge of ash. Balerion leapt, wings battering the air into whirlwinds. Camp shrank to dots. The sea glinted, patched by ice floes swirling like white petals. They turned inland, carving a beeline for the wall. Eastwatch's towers looked toy-small as they soared overhead. Cotter Pike stood on the gatehouse roof, saluting with an iron signal torch that blazed even in daylight. Men on the yard roared approval. The sound chased them south like invisible tide. Beyond the wall, the haunted forest spread endless and still. Wolves truly roamed there, but today, only croak of ravens marked life. Jon guided Balerion low between peaks to avoid unnatural winds that brewed near the arm of Dorne. They had no time for detours. At dusk they reached Last River, its serpentine body iced at edges, but still moving. Bran's words echoed. Mirror Lake lay northeast of here, a pocket of water hidden among granite ridges too steep for hearts to scale. They camped on a bluff, Arya trapped a snow hare, roasted it. Jon practiced ember control. Ghost prowled perimeter. Stars emerged like shards of sugar. The dark star faint near horizon. Second day they tracked river upstream. Snow deepened. Balerion remained airborne, scouting. In mid-afternoon, Arya spotted smoke plumes. 5, equidistant, each curling from stone cairns set on ridge crests. Atop each cairn burned pale blue flame despite stiff wind. Unnatural fire that shed frost instead of heat. Frost shepherd's sign. They circled wide, approached the largest cairn. No whites guarded it, only freshly disturbed snow around base. Jon dismounted. Studied runes carved into stone. Circles intersecting three-eyed skulls. At the center someone had placed a weirwood branch, bark still oozing red sap, now frozen. He scowled. Desecration of God's wood portends ritual. Arya crouched. Footprints head east. 3 people, light steps. She sniffed. Shrugged. Carry little weight. Scouts or couriers. Jon touched the frozen branch. Cold seeped through glove. He ignited mild ember to thaw it. Sap ran, steaming. The blue flame on cairn flickered, shrank. He channeled more heat until stone cracked, rune lines splitting. Flame died. Snowfall thickened suddenly, as if sky hissed annoyance, but nothing else occurred. They moved on, extinguishing each cairn with careful bursts. At the last a soft chime sounded, an alarm traveling along unseen lines of power. Arya cursed. Hurry. Balerion took them aloft. Night chased day now. Clouds massed slate purple ahead. Jon spotted a bowl-shaped valley glittering faintly. They descended onto a frozen shoreline of what must be Mirror. Water still as black glass, reflecting clouds so perfectly sky seemed doubled. In the precise center, a tiny island rose, crowned by a single weirwood, leafless yet alive. Its bark white as new snow, though its heartwood bled vivid scarlet cracks that pulsed like slow breaths. Roots coiled into the lake's surface, vanishing beneath. Around the island, the ice sheeting the lake parted, leaving a ring of liquid water that smoked faintly. Jon felt the ember respond, neither flaring hot nor retreating, but resonating at pitch with the tree. He directed Balerion to land on the ice rim. Arya slid down, surveying surroundings. "You feel that?" she asked. "Like the world inhaling," Jon replied. Ghost growled low, head cocked. Across lake, shadows emerged, figures cloaked in lambent frost. 7, 9, a dozen. Their faces hidden behind bone masks, each carried a staff tipped with shards reminiscent of the seabed heart, but duller. At their center walked a taller figure draped in midnight robes, left shoulder bound where Arya's blade had bitten. A patch of flesh wept blood that froze on fabric. The shattered king's herald. Jon stepped forward. "This ends here. No more pillars, no more chains." The sorcerer extended one hand. "You stand at mirror of beginnings, root of first accord. Heart forged must choose. Seal pact anew and serve balance, or shatter and unleash endless chase of storm and fire." Voice rattled like wind through brittle bones. "I choose life," Jon said. "Balance that grows, not devours. Growth begets heat. Heat melts world into flame. Freeze is mercy." With that, the masked devotees drove staves into the ice. Lines of frost shot outward, racing toward Jon. He raised his palm, channeled ember. Warmth rolled off him, boiling snow mid-flight. The lines cracked, stalled a yard away. Balerion roared, wings mantling, flame licking his throat. Jon held him back. Too much fire here might harm the roots beneath. Instead, he stepped onto ice, letting the embers spread through boots into surface. Where he walked, thin lines of molten water traced his path, snaking toward island. Followers advanced, only to skid as ice liquefied underfoot. Arya hurled herself into combat, dancing between lances of frost magic, severing staves faster than foes could react. Ghost harried edges, knocking cultists into frigid water where frost spells could not congeal fast enough before they drowned. The sorcerer retreated onto island, arms lifting in chant. The weirwood's crimson fissures brightened. roots pulsing. Jon strode across newly formed bridge of steam and water. Each step taxed him. Heat bled from marrow. He recalled Vymon's caution, burn too bright and hollow remains. But he pressed on, feeling Bran's presence, seeing flickers of his brother seated beneath Winterfell's heart tree, eyes white, guiding. He reached the island crest. Bark veins glowed. Sap dripped, hissing where it met snow. The sorcerer stood before Trunk, arms flung wide. Blood of dragon, blood of wolf. Give heart unto root, bind cycle. He drew a shard of black ice tipped with red core. Smaller than seabed heart but potent. Jon unsheathed Longclaw. Last warning. The sorcerer plunged shard into weirwood trunk. A scream tore the air, tree's voice or earth's. Roots convulsed. The mirror lake shattered into concentric cracks. Cold, surged like avalanche. Jon answered, palm splayed on bark beside shard. He channeled ember, feeling veins of fire snake into wood. Heat met cold, warred. The trunk vibrated, cracks sealing then reopening. The sorcerer shoved at Jon, frost blade appearing in opposite hand. Arya intercepted, parrying just in time, her own blade ringing. Jon focused inward, seeing ember as glowing sphere. He breathed slow, imagined weaving strands of cold and hot around one another, like rope rather than smashing. The sigil negative spoke of mutual annihilation, but rope held if strands intertwined. He let a ribbon of ember coil around shards cold, embracing without overpowering. Pain lanced along his arm, frostbite and burn at once. He grit teeth, maintained mental image of braided red-blue thread sinking into heartwood. The tree shuddered, then quieted. Sap ceased boiling, bark fissures calmed to steady pulse. Neither bright nor dark, but steady deep crimson. A wave rippled outward, toppling cultists. Frost lines on lake receded into staves, which cracked. The sorcerer staggered, armor of ice sloughing off. Arya pressed attack, slicing tendon at knee. He fell, mask shattering. Beneath, a face almost elven, skin dappled with scales of faint blue stone, eyes luminous and old. He wheezed. Cycle, broken? Jon knelt. Mended, he replied, but not yours to steer. The sorcerer tried to summon frost, but only cold vapor rose. Expression flickered through grief to strange peace. Then dawn. Shall last an age, he whispered, eyelids fluttering closed. Frost crept across his skin, crystallizing him into a statue that wind crumbled to powder. Silence reigned. The weirwood's leaves, new leaves, burst from dormant buds. Tiny white points tipped pink. The mirror lake stilled, cracks healed, surface reflecting stars. Jon leaned back, trembling. Arya seized his shoulders. Breathing? He nodded, though lungs burned. Balerion landed, curling tail around island's rim without breaking reflection. Ghost padded over ice that now held firm as tempered glass. They gathered at trunk. Jon withdrew shard, now clear crystal, neither flaming nor iced. He handed it to Arya. A mirror, of all sides, he said. She turned it in lamplight. Rainbow veins danced, but no chill, no heat. They camped on island. Jon slept against root, bulged like bench, dreams quiet. Dawn broke clear. Bran arrived mid-morning, riding a sledge drawn by 2 white elk, and guided by Mira Reed. How he'd known path none asked. Some answers are seeds not yet sprouted. Bran stroked the weirwood, eyes distant. Roots whisper of new covenant, he said. World need not alternate cuts of furnace and blizzard, now that heart forged learnin' to braid. He fixed Jon with gentle gravity. Guard this braid. Some will tug. Many. Jon exhaled, glancing skyward. Dark star still visible, now ringed by faint halo neither bright nor dim. A reminder. They flew south 2 days later, Arya with Mira on elk sledge. Bran astride Balerion behind Jon, his hands splayed on scale to listen. Ghost raced snow trails below. They reached Winterfell near dusk of second day. The castle's lights glowed welcoming. Banners of wolf and dragon crackled mild wind. Sansa greeted them in courtyard, eyes misting when she saw Bran safe and Arya alive. The northern lords gathered in hall to hear tale, one of living ice statues, mirror trees, and a heart, neither blazing nor frozen. Later, as fires burned low, and wine worked memories loose, Jon slipped to Godswood. The heart tree rustled, though wind slept. He laid hand on its face, feeling ember and weird blood pulse as one. Bran's wheelchair rolled up behind. New balance, Bran murmured. Snow that nourishes, fire that warms, neither that destroys. Jon asked, "Will there be peace?" "For a season," Bran said. "Longer if men cultivate it." He smiled faintly. "Dragons and wolves can garden, if they learn patience." Footsteps approached. Sansa, Nymeria newly arrived by Raven escort, Davos dust-coated from ride, Tormund laughing loud at gate. Voices of realms patchwork chorus swelled. Jon faced them, ember calm, frost memory distant, dawn rising steady. He spoke. "Tomorrow we sow grain halls, raise towers, weave laws to shelter both highborn and hearthborn. Dragon and direwolf will guard sky and earth alike, and when next storm gathers, we'll meet it together, wood, steel, root, and wing." The company nodded. Sisters, brother, friends, former foes. Wind sighed through needled pines, carrying scent of thawing soil. Far above, stars glimmered. The dark star now a dim ember among them, no longer foreboding but companion. Winter's bite lingered, yet spring's pulse grew stronger. Balance, once a battered scale, now flexed like living branch. And Jon Snow, king of no throne, rider of a dragon reborn, walked back toward Hall's golden glow with his kin. Leaving Godswood to its quiet songs, resolved that the next chapters of dawn would be written not in ash or shattered ice, but in ink of tilled earth and honest sweat, beneath wings that shadowed the realm, not with dread, but with the promise of watchful peace.